I found a frozen angel, drifting in the Arctic Ocean, and he wasn't dead, just asleep before I start. Do me a favor. Comment where you're listening from right now. Your bedroom, your car, headphones on during a night shift. Doesn't matter. Just tell me. Because if this story disappears tomorrow, if my account goes dark, or I suddenly stop posting, at least I'll know somebody, somewhere, heard what I'm about to tell you before they erased me. And trust me, they've tried. 3 times in the last 6 months, my accounts have been suspended for violating community guidelines. Funny how telling the truth is a violation these days. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you who I am, or at least who I used to be before March 14th, 2019, the day that destroyed everything I thought I knew about this world, about God, about why we're really here, the day I found him. My name is Jake Mercer. I'm 34 years old, and until 18 months ago, I was a staff sergeant in the United States Air Force, stationed primarily out of Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage, Alaska. I spent 8 years, 8 long, cold, brutal years, running search and rescue operations in some of the most unforgiving territory on this planet. The Arctic doesn't care about your training, your equipment, or your prayers. It'll kill you in minutes if you're not careful, and sometimes it'll kill you even if you are. I've pulled bodies out of frozen water that were so cold they shattered when we moved them. I've found entire crews dead in their bunks, frozen solid with their eyes still open, staring at nothing. The cold up there does things to people, to their minds. You start seeing things that aren't there, hearing voices in the wind. At least, that's what I used to think. That's what I told myself for 8 years. Now I know better. I was good at my job, really good. I had 43 successful rescue missions under my belt, saved over 100 lives, got a chest full of commendations and medals that are currently sitting in a box in my closet because I can't stand to look at them anymore. They gave me an honorable discharge after what happened, which is military speak for, we're paying you to shut up and disappear. They threw in a decent pension, full medical benefits, and a psych evaluation that conveniently labeled me as suffering from extreme acute stress reaction with dissociative features. Translation, they think I lost my mind in the cold. Maybe I did. Maybe what I saw wasn't real, and I've spent the last 18 months chasing shadows and conspiracies like some paranoid lunatic. But I've got something they don't know about. Something I kept hidden even when they searched my gear, my apartment, my entire life. Physical proof that what happened was real. And when you see it, when I show you what he gave me before he went back under the ice, you'll understand why I can't let this go. Here's what you need to understand before I tell you the rest. I wasn't some religious guy before this happened. I grew up Catholic, sure, did the whole Sunday school thing, First Communion, confirmation, the works. But by the time I enlisted at 19, I'd pretty much decided that if God existed, he'd checked out a long time ago. I'd seen too much pain, too much random suffering to believe in some benevolent creator watching over us. My mom died of cancer when I was 16. Screaming in pain even with all the morphine they pumped into her. Where was God then? Where was he when I pulled a 6-year-old girl out of a crashed plane in the Bering Sea, still strapped in her seat, frozen solid with her little hands reaching for her mother who was 3 rows back? No, I stopped believing in divine intervention or guardian angels or any of that comforting bullshit people tell themselves to sleep better at night. The universe was random, cold, and indifferent. We were alone. That's what I believed. That's what made sense. So when I tell you I found an angel, a real one, frozen in a block of ice in the middle of the Arctic Ocean, I need you to understand that I'm the last person who wanted to believe it. I fought against it. I tried to rationalize it, explain it away, convince myself I was hallucinating or suffering from hypothermia-induced psychosis. But you can't argue with something that looks you in the eyes and speaks directly into your mind without moving its lips. You can't rationalize away something that shows you memories of events that happened thousands of years before you were born. You can't explain away the physical changes that happened to everyone who came in contact with him, the way our equipment malfunctioned, the way Sarah started having seizures, the way I still can't sleep more than 3 hours a night, because every time I close my eyes I see fragments of things I shouldn't remember, places I've never been, battles fought in skies that don't exist anymore. They'll tell you I'm crazy if you ask them. The Air Force, I mean. They've got a whole file on me, I'm sure, documenting my mental breakdown. They'll show you the incident reports, the psych evaluations, the testimony from the other people who were there that conveniently contradicts everything I'm saying. They'll tell you we found a Russian research vessel adrift with a dead crew and some kind of experimental cryogenic preservation unit that I mistook for something supernatural because of stress and isolation. They've got their story straight, nice and clean and rational, and maybe you'll believe them instead of me. I wouldn't blame you. I probably would have believed them too, before it happened to me. But here's the thing they can't explain away. Why did 3 of the 5 people involved in the recovery mission die within 6 weeks? Why did Sarah Chen, a healthy 32-year-old physician with no history of medical problems, suddenly have a brain aneurysm burst in her sleep? Why did Lieutenant Marcus Webb, one of the security officers assigned to the lab, walk into the Alaskan wilderness in the middle of winter, wearing only his underwear, and never come back? Hypothermia, they said. Suicide by exposure. Sure. I'm telling you this story now because I'm running out of time. I can feel it. They're closing in, tightening the net. My phone's been tapped for months. I can hear the clicks, the slight delay on calls. There's a car that parks across from my apartment 3 nights a week. Different drivers, but always the same black Suburban with government plates. My VA psychiatrist keeps pushing me to increase my medication, tells me the delusions will fade if I just take the higher dose. I've been playing along, pretending to swallow the pills, nodding when he tells me that what I think I saw was just my brain's way of coping with trauma. But I know what I saw, I know what he told me, and I know what's coming, even if nobody else wants to hear it. That's why I'm recording this, posting it everywhere I can think of, making sure at least some version of the truth survives even if I don't. So here it is, the whole story, start to finish. What we found in the Arctic on March 14th, 2019. What woke up after 3 days in that lab. What he told me about God, about free will, about why angels can't help us even when they want to, about what's coming and why we're not ready. I'm going to tell you everything, every detail I can remember, and then you can decide for yourself what to believe. Maybe you'll think I'm insane. Maybe you'll think this is just some creative writing exercise, fiction dressed up as truth. That's fine. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to testify, to put the truth on record before they bury me along with it. Because after what I saw, after what he showed me, I can't stay silent, even if it costs me everything, especially if it costs me everything. One more thing before I get into it. If you're someone who needs their faith to get through the day, someone who finds comfort in believing that God is watching over you and everything happens for a reason, you might want to stop listening now, because what I'm about to tell you will shake that faith down to its foundations. It did mine.
The angel I met, Azrael, he said I could call him, though that wasn't his real name. He didn't confirm what we believe in church on Sundays. He didn't tell me that God loves us and has a plan, and everything will be okay in the end. What he told me was harder, colder, and somehow more terrifying than anything I'd ever imagined. He told me we're free, completely, utterly, terrifyingly free, and that freedom is both God's greatest gift and his cruelest curse.
You'll understand what I mean by the end of this, but first, I need to tell you about the mission. About the Russian vessel, about the moment I first saw those wings through the ice and felt my entire understanding of reality crack like thin ice under too much weight. Ready? Okay, here we go. March 14th, 2019. The day everything changed. The day I stopped being Staff Sergeant Jake Mercer, decorated rescue specialist, and became something else. A witness, a warning, maybe a madman. You decide. But whatever you do, don't say I didn't warn you. And remember where you were when you heard this story. Because something tells me you're going to need to remember. When what's coming finally arrives, you'll understand why I couldn't keep quiet, why I had to tell someone, anyone, even if they lock me up or worse. The truth demands to be spoken, even when nobody wants to hear it, especially then. March 14th, 2019. I remember the date because it was a Thursday, and I remember it was a Thursday because I was supposed to have that day off. I'd pulled 3 rescue ops in the previous 8 days, and I was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired where even coffee doesn't help anymore, where you just want to sleep for 16 hours straight. I was actually in bed, finally warm for the first time in a week, when my phone rang at 0347 hours. The sound of that ringtone still makes my heart rate spike. It was the emergency line, which meant someone somewhere was dying or about to die, and I was the poor bastard who had to go try to save them. I almost didn't answer. I actually stared at that phone for 3 rings, wondering what would happen if I just let it go to voicemail, if I just took one night off. But that's not how I'm wired. 8 years of training, 8 years of hearing that ring and knowing that every second I delayed could be the difference between life and death. So I answered. And that decision, that simple choice to pick up the phone instead of ignoring it, set everything else in motion. The voice on the other end was Lieutenant Colonel Barnes, my CO, and he sounded stressed. That was unusual. Barnes was old-school Air Force, the kind of guy who could stay calm while the plane was literally on fire. If he was rattled, something was seriously wrong. "Mercer, I need you at the hangar in 30 minutes. Full cold weather gear, extended range pack." I was already getting dressed while he talked, phone wedged between my shoulder and ear. "What's the situation, sir?" There was a pause, just a second too long. "Russian fishing vessel, the Academic Volkov, went dark 4 days ago in Canadian Arctic waters. Coast Guard spotted it on radar yesterday. Dead in the water, no response to radio contact. International maritime law says we have to check it out, render aid if necessary, but there's a problem." I was pulling on my thermal base layer, already knowing I wasn't going to like what came next. "What kind of problem?" Another pause. "Storm system moving in from the north. Big one. If we don't get there in the next 4 hours, that ship's going to be locked in ice for the next 3 months, and everyone aboard is dead if they're not already." 30 minutes later, I was at the hangar, and that's when I met the 2 people who would be on this mission with me. The first was Chief Warrant Officer Tommy Delgado, pilot, 42 years old, 20 years in the Air Force with more flight hours over the Arctic than anyone else on base. Tommy was short, stocky, had a thick Boston accent, and a tendency to crack jokes at exactly the wrong moments, which somehow made him perfect for rescue work. You need someone who can keep it light when you're pulling frozen corpses out of the water. We'd flown together maybe a dozen times before, and I trusted him completely. If Tommy said the weather was too bad to fly, we didn't fly. If he said he could get us there, he could get us there. He was standing next to the helicopter, our HH-60 Pavehawk, running through his pre-flight check with his usual methodical precision. When he saw me approaching, he looked up and shook his head. "This is a bad one, Jake. Really bad. I've been watching the weather reports, and that storm is moving faster than they predicted. We've got maybe a 4-hour window, and that's being optimistic." The second person was someone I'd never worked with before. Dr. Sarah Chen, 32 years old, civilian contractor, medical degree from Johns Hopkins, specialized in cold weather trauma and emergency medicine. She'd been at the base for maybe 3 weeks, brought in to train our medical personnel on new hypothermia treatment protocols. I'd seen her around but never really talked to her. She was tiny, maybe 5'2", looked like she weighed about 100 pounds soaking wet, and I remember thinking she looked way too small and too young to be heading into the Arctic in the middle of a storm. But when she shook my hand, her grip was firm, confident, and her eyes were sharp. "Sergeant Mercer, I've read your file. Impressive track record." Her voice had no accent I could place. Neutral American English, precise and professional. "Colonel Barnes asked me to come along in case we find survivors with severe hypothermia or frostbite. I'm told you're the best at what you do, so I'll try not to slow you down." I liked her immediately. No ego, no bravado, just competence and calm. I wish I'd gotten to know her better before everything went to hell. We took off at 0442 hours, just as the sky was starting to show that pale gray light that passes for dawn in the Arctic in March. The flight plan had us heading northeast, over the Beaufort Sea, into Canadian waters, about 400 nautical miles total. In good weather, maybe 2.5 hours, but the weather wasn't good. The weather was, to use Tommy's technical term, absolutely fucked. We flew into clouds so thick you couldn't see the rotors spinning above us, turbulence that threw us around like a toy, winds gusting to 60 knots that had Tommy fighting the controls every second. Sarah sat in back with me, strapped in tight, her face pale but composed. She didn't complain, didn't ask if this was normal, just held on and kept her medical kit secured on her lap. I appreciated that. Nothing worse than someone panicking on a flight like that, asking every 30 seconds if we're going to crash. Tommy's voice crackled over the headset every few minutes, giving us updates. "Visibility 0, flying on instruments only. GPS is getting wonky, solar activity maybe. Fuel consumption higher than expected because of headwinds. We're good, but it's going to be tight on the way back." About 90 minutes into the flight, that's when I first felt it. That feeling I mentioned before, the sense that something was wrong. It wasn't anything specific, just this growing unease in my gut, like the feeling you get when you know you've forgotten something important but can't remember what. I'd learned to trust that instinct over the years. It had saved my life more than once. I leaned forward and tapped Tommy on the shoulder. You feeling anything weird? He glanced back at me, and I could see in his eyes that he did. Yeah, can't put my finger on it, but yeah, something's off. Radio's been acting strange for the last 20 minutes. Lots of static, like interference, and the instruments keep glitching. Nothing major, just little things. Compass spinning, altimeter jumping around. Probably just the storm screwing with the electronics. But he didn't sound convinced. Neither was I. I'd flown in dozens of storms worse than this one, and I'd never seen our equipment act like that. Sarah was watching both of us, and I could see the question in her eyes, but she didn't ask it. Smart woman. We finally got visual on the ship at 0721 hours, and the sight of it made my blood run cold. The Akademik Volkov was a mid-sized fishing trawler, maybe 200 feet long, Russian registry. The kind of vessel you see all over the Arctic fishing grounds. But something about it was wrong. It was just sitting there, dead in the water, engines off, no lights, no movement on deck. The sea around it was starting to freeze, thin sheets of ice forming in the calmer patches between swells. In another few hours, it would be locked in solid. Tommy brought us down low, circling the vessel, looking for any signs of life, any indication of what happened. Nothing. The deck was covered in snow and ice, the rigging frozen solid, icicles hanging from every surface. But here's what really got me. There was no damage, no fire, no hull breach, no signs of a collision or explosion. The ship looked perfect, just frozen and abandoned, like everyone just decided to stop what they were doing and disappear. "I'm not seeing anywhere safe to land on deck," Tommy said, his voice tense. "Too much ice, too many obstacles. I'm going to have to put you down on the ice next to the ship. It looks stable enough, but be careful. Stay roped together." We geared up while Tommy held us in a hover about 10 feet above the ice. The rotor wash was blowing snow everywhere, visibility dropping to almost nothing. I went first, fast roping down onto the frozen surface, my boots hitting hard. The ice held. Sarah came down next, moving carefully but efficiently for someone who'd probably never fast roped in her life. Tommy stayed with the bird, engines running, ready to pull us out if things went bad. The cold hit me like a physical force the moment I was out of the helicopter. 40 below zero, maybe worse with wind chill, cold enough that breathing hurt, that exposed skin would freeze in seconds. We moved toward the ship's hull, found the pilot ladder hanging down the side, frozen but intact. I went up first, Sarah right behind me, both of us roped together in case one of us fell. The climb felt longer than it was, maybe 30 feet, my hands going numb even through the insulated gloves. When I pulled myself over the railing onto the deck, I had to stop and catch my breath, my lungs burning from the cold air. And that's when I saw the first body. He was frozen solid, sitting with his back against the bulkhead near the aft deck, hands in his lap, eyes open. He looked peaceful, almost like he was just resting, except he was covered in frost and ice and hadn't moved in days. His expression wasn't one of pain or fear or panic. He looked calm, almost serene. That was the first thing that struck me as wrong. People who die of hypothermia, especially at sea in these conditions, they don't look peaceful. They look terrified, desperate, frozen in the middle of trying to save themselves. This guy looked like he'd just decided to sit down and wait. Sarah climbed up behind me, saw the body, and immediately went into medical mode, checking for vitals, even though we both knew it was pointless. Dead at least 48 hours, probably longer. No signs of trauma, no obvious cause of death besides exposure. She looked up at me, her face troubled. "Jake, why would he be sitting out here? Why wouldn't he go inside where it's warmer?" I didn't have an answer, but I was about to find 6 more bodies that would make that question even more disturbing. We moved toward the main cabin door, our boots crunching on ice-covered deck. The wind was howling now, the storm getting closer. Tommy's voice in my headset warning us we had maybe 90 minutes before he'd have to pull us out whether we were done or not. I tried the cabin door, locked from the inside. I had to use a pry bar to force it open, ice breaking away in sheets as the door swung inward. The interior was dark, emergency lighting casting everything in a dim red glow, and it was quiet, too quiet. No engine noise, no generators running, no sound at all except our breathing and the wind outside. I pulled out my flashlight, swept the beam across the corridor. Everything looked normal. No signs of struggle, no damage, no evidence of what could have killed the crew. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the narrow space. "Anyone here? U.S. Air Force? We're here to help." Nothing, just that terrible, pressing silence. Sarah was right behind me, her hand on my shoulder. following my lead through the dark ship. And that's when I noticed something that made no sense at all. My breath wasn't fogging. It was freezing outside, barely above freezing in the corridor. But my breath wasn't fogging like it should. The air felt wrong, heavy somehow, like pressure before a thunderstorm. I looked back at Sarah. "You feel that?" She nodded, her eyes wide. "Something's not right here, Jake. We should sweep the ship fast and get out." She was right, but we had a job to do. We had to find out what happened to this crew. So we went deeper into the ship, down into the corridor toward the crew quarters. And with every step, that feeling of wrongness got stronger, like we were walking towards something we weren't supposed to find. Something that had been waiting in the dark and cold for a very, very long time. We found the rest of the crew in their quarters. 6 more bodies, all of them frozen, all of them with that same peaceful expression that made my skin crawl. 3 in their bunks, tucked in like they'd just decided to take a nap and never woke up. 2 sitting at the small table in the galley, cups of tea still on the surface, frozen solid. 1 in the shower stall, still standing upright, frozen in place with frost covering his hair and beard. 7 men total. The entire crew of the academic Volkov, dead for at least 3 days, maybe 4. But here's what didn't make sense. The ship's engines were still running. Not the main propulsion, but the generators, the heating system, the electrical. Everything was still on when they died. The fuel tanks were 3/4 full. The emergency beacon hadn't been activated. There was food in the galley, fresh water in the tanks, medical supplies untouched. These men didn't die because the ship failed. They didn't freeze because they ran out of heat or supplies. They just stopped, like someone flipped a switch and they all decided to lay down and die. Sarah checked every body while I documented the scene with my helmet camera, protocol for any recovery mission. She kept shaking her head, her face getting more troubled with each examination. "Jake, this doesn't make any medical sense. Hypothermia doesn't work like this. You don't just peacefully freeze to death while sitting in a heated cabin drinking tea. Your body fights it. You get confused. You start tearing off your clothes because you feel hot. You try to burrow into small spaces. These men look like they just accepted it." The ship's log was in the bridge, a small cramped space filled with outdated equipment and navigation charts. Everything was in Russian, but Sarah read Cyrillic. Her mother was Ukrainian. She'd grown up bilingual. She found the captain's logbook, a physical paper journal because apparently Russian fishing vessels still do things old school. The entries were routine for the most part. Weather reports, fishing locations, catch numbers, the usual stuff you'd expect. But then, 3 days before the Coast Guard spotted them drifting, the entries changed. Sarah translated as she read, her voice getting quieter with each line. March 9th, nets pulled up something unusual. Large object, frozen in ice, approximately 3 meters in length. Captain Volkov ordered it brought aboard for examination. Crew uneasy about it. March 10th, object remains frozen despite being in heated cargo hold. Temperature around it measures 15 degrees colder than ambient. Some crew members report strange dreams. March 11th, 4 crew members refusing to go near cargo hold. Report feeling observed. Captain ordered object to be dumped overboard, but winch system malfunctioned. Will attempt removal tomorrow. And then, the final entry, March 11th, late evening. Sarah's hands were shaking as she read it. He is looking at us through the ice. We can feel his eyes. Even with our eyes closed, we can feel him watching. It is not malevolent. It is not angry, but it is so old, so very old, and so sad. God forgive us for what we have brought aboard. I felt my stomach drop. They found something in the ice, something they pulled up in their fishing nets. Sarah was staring at the logbook like it might bite her. "Jake, this sounds like a bunch of guys losing their minds from isolation and cold. Mass hysteria. It happens in Arctic conditions, the psychological stress." "Then why are they all dead?" I interrupted. "Why did they freeze to death on a ship with heat and power and food? Why do they all look peaceful? And what the hell is in the cargo hold?" We stared at each other for a long moment, and I could see the same conflict in her eyes that I was feeling. Every rational part of my brain was screaming that this was just a tragic accident, environmental factors, maybe carbon monoxide poisoning causing hallucinations and death. But that instinct, that gut feeling that had kept me alive through 8 years of dangerous rescues, was screaming something else. Something was wrong here, something beyond wrong. Tommy's voice crackled in my headset, making us both jump. "Jake, I'm watching the weather radar and we've got maybe 40 minutes before this storm hits hard. You need to wrap up whatever you're doing and get back here. I keyed my mic. Copy that. We found the crew. All dead. We need to check the cargo hold and then we're coming out. There was a pause. The cargo hold? Jake, we don't have time. Tommy, whatever killed these men might still be on this ship. I need to know what it is before we leave. Another pause. Longer this time. 10 minutes. That's all you get. Then I'm pulling out with or without you. The cargo hold was accessed through a hatch on the main deck, a ladder leading down into darkness. I went first, flashlight mounted on my rifle, Sarah right behind me. The temperature dropped immediately as we descended, our breath finally fogging in the air. It was at least 20 degrees colder down here than the rest of the ship, cold enough that frost was forming on the metal walls. My flashlight beam swept across the space. Nets, equipment, empty storage containers. And then it hit something that made me stop breathing. In the center of the hold, sitting in a pool of melted water, was a block of ice. Huge, maybe 3 meters tall and 2 meters wide, translucent and slightly blue, like ancient glacier ice. But it wasn't the ice that froze me in place. It was what was inside it. I could see a shape, a silhouette, something large suspended in the ice like an insect trapped in amber. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. It looked human, or at least humanoid, but the proportions were wrong. Too tall, too elongated, and there were other shapes extending from the back, curves and angles that didn't make sense. Sarah came down beside me, and I heard her sharp intake of breath. Oh my God. Jake, what is that? I moved closer, hand shaking as I directed my flashlight at the ice. The beam refracted through it, creating strange shadows and highlights, and then I saw it clearly, and my entire understanding of reality cracked like thin ice under too much weight. It was a person, or something that looked like a person. The face was visible through the ice, and it was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. Perfectly symmetrical features, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, full lips. The skin looked pale, almost bluish-white, like marble. The eyes were closed, long lashes resting against the cheeks. Hair that might have been white or very pale blonde. I couldn't tell through the ice. But the thing that made my knees weak, that made every hair on my body stand up, were the wings. 2 massive wings, folded against the back of the figure, each one at least 8 feet long, covered in what looked like feathers, but also like they were made of ice or crystal or something that caught the light and fractured it into tiny rainbows. This wasn't a person. This wasn't anything I had words for. Sarah grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to hurt through my jacket. Jake, we need to leave, right now. Whatever this is, we should not be here. She was right. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to climb back up that ladder and get the hell off this ship, but I couldn't move. I was transfixed, staring at this impossible thing frozen in ice. And then it got worse. As I stood there, flashlight still pointed at the block of ice, I felt something. Not physical, not like a touch or a sound. More like a presence, like when you know someone is watching you even though you can't see them. The air in the cargo hold felt heavy, oppressive, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. My ears started ringing, a high-pitched tone that made my teeth ache. And I swear to God I felt something brush against my mind, like invisible fingers touching the inside of my skull. Not painful, but deeply unsettling. Intimate in a way that made me want to vomit. An emotion that wasn't mine flooded through me. Overwhelming sadness, so profound and deep that tears started running down my face before I could stop them. Sarah was experiencing it too, I could tell. She was crying, her whole body shaking, still gripping my arm. "Jake," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Jake, it's awake. I don't know how I know that, but it's awake. It's aware of us. Oh God, we woke it up." The ringing in my ears got louder, and for just a second, I swear this is true, even though I know how crazy it sounds. I heard a voice, not in my ears, in my head, a voice like nothing I'd ever heard, simultaneously male and female, young and ancient, speaking words I didn't understand but somehow knew the meaning of. Finally, after so long, finally, I broke the paralysis and grabbed Sarah, pulling her toward the ladder. "We're leaving. Now. We're taking this thing with us." She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "What? Jake? No, we can't. Look around!" I shouted, my voice echoing in the hold. 7 men died on this ship. They pulled this thing out of the ocean, and 3 days later they were all dead. Whatever this is, we can't just leave it here. What if another ship finds it? What if it gets free on its own? We need to get it somewhere secure, somewhere it can be studied by people who know what the hell they're doing. I was making it up as I went along, rationalizing a decision that defied all logic. The truth is, I couldn't leave it. Something about it pulled at me, demanded that I not abandon it in this frozen cargo hold. Maybe it was that voice in my head. Maybe it was the overwhelming sadness I'd felt. Or maybe I was already under its influence and just didn't know it yet. Sarah looked at me, at the ice block, then back at me. This is insane. This is the most insane thing I've ever heard. But, okay. How do we even move something that size? The answer was the ship's cargo winch and a lot of very careful rigging. Tommy was screaming at me through the radio the entire time, telling me the storm was getting worse, that we needed to leave immediately, that I was out of my mind. He wasn't wrong about that last part. It took us 20 minutes to get the ice block out of the hold and onto the deck, using the ship's crane system. The thing was heavy, had to weigh at least 2 tons, and it was awkward as hell to maneuver. Every time we touched it, even through heavy gloves, that sensation of being watched intensified. Sarah was pale, looking like she might pass out at any moment. I wasn't much better. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the rigging, but we got it done. We got the block secured, and then Tommy brought the helicopter in close, hovering just above the deck in conditions that should have made it impossible to maintain position. He lowered the cargo hooks, and we attached them to the rigging we'd wrapped around the ice. The whole time I kept waiting for something to go wrong, for the ice to crack open, for whatever was inside to wake up and what? I didn't know. I just knew that every second we spent near it made my skin crawl and my head pound. Finally, we had it hooked up. Tommy began to lift, the helicopter's engines screaming with the effort of hauling 2 tons of ice into the air. Sarah and I climbed back up the pilot ladder one more time, both of us exhausted and half frozen. As we reached the deck, I looked back at the academic Volkov one last time, that ghost ship, with its dead crew and its secrets frozen in their eyes. I had a sudden, terrible certainty that we were making a mistake, that we should cut the lines and let the ice block drop back into the ocean, let it sink back into the dark depths where it had been for God knows how long. But it was too late. We were already moving, Tommy pulling us away from the ship, the ice block dangling beneath us like some bizarre cargo. Sarah and I fast roped down onto the ice next to where Tommy had originally dropped us off. Then we climbed back into the helicopter. Tommy immediately pulled up and away, the ice block swinging wildly beneath us, the additional weight making the aircraft strain and shudder. "I hope you know what the hell you're doing," Tommy shouted over the roar of the engines. I looked out the window at the block of ice suspended below us, at the shadow of those wings visible through the translucent surface. "Yeah," I shouted back. "Me too." The flight back was a nightmare. The storm hit us hard about 30 minutes in, winds tossing us around like a toy, ice forming on the rotors, every warning light on the instrument panel flashing. The extra weight of the ice block made us handle like a drunk elephant, and Tommy was fighting the controls every second, sweat pouring down his face despite the cold. We were burning fuel at an alarming rate, and there was a very real possibility we wouldn't make it back to base. Sarah was in the back, strapped in tight, her eyes closed, lips moving like she was praying. I'd never seen her pray before. Hell, I'd never prayed before. Not really. Not since I was a kid forced to go to church. But I was praying now. Please let us make it back. Please don't let us crash into the Arctic Ocean with this thing. Please, if there's a God, if there's anyone listening, get us home. And then, in the middle of that storm, with death feeling very close and very real, I felt it again. That presence, that awareness from the thing in the ice below us. And I heard that voice in my head, clearer this time, almost gentle. "Do not fear. I will not let you fall. You are important. You will understand soon." The words should have terrified me. Instead, they filled me with a strange calm. The shaking in my hands stopped. My heartbeat slowed. I looked out the window at the storm raging around us, at the ice and snow and darkness, and somehow I knew we were going to make it. We were going to make it because whatever was in that ice wanted us to make it. We landed at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson at 13:47 hours, running on fumes, the helicopter damaged but intact. As soon as we touched down, the whole area was swarmed with security personnel, officers, people in hazmat suits, equipment I didn't recognize. Word had obviously been passed up the chain of command about what we were bringing back, and the military was taking it very seriously. They separated the three of us immediately, took our gear, our phones, everything. Men in suits that screamed government showed up within an hour. That's when I knew we'd stumbled into something bigger than a simple rescue mission. They loaded the ice block onto a flatbed truck, covered it with tarps, and drove it away surrounded by armed guards. I tried to ask where they were taking it, what was going to happen to it. They told me it was classified, that I'd be briefed when appropriate, that I needed to keep my mouth shut about everything I'd seen. Standard government bullshit. But here's the thing, I could still feel it. Even after they drove it away, even after they put me in a room for debriefing, I could still feel that presence at the edge of my mind. Like a frequency I was now tuned to, like it had left a mark on me that I couldn't wash off. And in the quiet moments when I was alone, I could have sworn I heard it whisper, "Soon, very soon, and then you will understand everything." Look, I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking I should have left it there, that the smart thing, the sane thing, would have been to mark the location, report what we found, and let someone else deal with it. Maybe seal the cargo hold, scuttle the ship, let it sink to the bottom of the Arctic Ocean where it could stay frozen for another 1,000 years. And you'd be right, that's exactly what I should have done. But here's something I've learned about moments that change your life. You rarely recognize them when they're happening. You don't get a warning label that says, "This decision will haunt you forever," or "Everything you think you know is about to be proven wrong." You just make a choice, usually a stupid one, and then you have to live with the consequences. So when I tell you that I decided to bring that thing back with us, that I convinced Tommy and Sarah to help me load 2 tons of impossible ice onto our helicopter in the middle of a storm, I need you to understand, I wasn't thinking clearly. None of us were. We'd been exposed to something that was already working on our minds, rewriting our survival instincts, making the irrational seem reasonable. Let me back up a bit and tell you exactly what we found, because the details matter. After Sarah finished translating that last entry in the captain's log, the one about something watching them through the ice, we stood there in the bridge for maybe 30 seconds, neither of us saying anything. The wind was howling outside, the ship creaking and groaning, and Tommy's voice kept coming through our headsets telling us to hurry up, but I couldn't move. I was trying to process what we'd just read, trying to make it fit into my understanding of how the world worked. Something in the ice. Something that made 7 experienced fishermen so disturbed they all died rather than, what? Rather than stay near it? Rather than keep living with whatever they'd seen or felt? That didn't make sense. None of it made sense. Sarah finally broke the silence. "Jake, we need to see it. Whatever they found, it's still on this ship. We need to document it. Take photos, maybe samples if possible." She was already thinking like a scientist, compartmentalizing the fear, focusing on the task. I envied that ability. All I could think about was that last line, "He is looking at us through the ice." We found the cargo hold access on the main deck near the stern, a heavy metal hatch with a wheel lock, the kind that's supposed to be watertight. It was standing open, which was weird because protocol would be to keep it sealed in rough seas. I shined my flashlight down the hatch and saw a ladder disappearing into darkness below. The air coming up from down there was cold. I mean, seriously cold. Colder than it had any right to be. My breath fogged immediately when I leaned over the opening, and frost was forming on the ladder rungs. "That's not normal," I said, stating the obvious. Sarah leaned over next to me, her shoulder touching mine. The cargo hold should be roughly the same temperature as the rest of the ship, maybe a few degrees colder, but not enough to cause frost formation like this. It's like there's a refrigeration unit running down there, but we both knew there wasn't. We'd checked the ship's systems. Everything was running on emergency power only, just enough for lights and basic heating, not enough to create an environment cold enough to freeze metal. Tommy's voice crackled again. "Jake, I'm serious. Storm's getting close. You've got maybe 20 minutes before I have to pull out." I keyed my mic. "Copy that. We're checking the cargo hold now. Make it fast." I went down first, rifle slung across my back, flashlight in one hand, the other gripping the icy rungs of the ladder. Each step down, the temperature dropped. By the time I reached the bottom, maybe 15 feet down, it felt like I'd stepped into a freezer. My breath wasn't just fogging anymore. It was crystallizing in the air. Tiny ice particles that caught my flashlight beam and sparkled like glitter. The cargo hold was bigger than I expected, maybe 40 feet long and 20 feet wide, with a ceiling height of about 8 feet. Storage crates and fishing equipment lined the walls, nets bundled in corners, the normal stuff you'd expect on a vessel like this. But in the center of the space, impossible to miss, was the thing the crew had pulled up from the ocean, the block of ice. And it was massive. I'd read 3 meters in the log and thought I knew what to expect, but seeing it in person was different. It had to be at least 10 feet tall and 6 feet wide, an irregular rectangle that looked like it had been carved by nature rather than by tools. The ice itself was unlike anything I'd ever seen, and I'd seen a lot of ice in 8 years working the Arctic. This wasn't the white, opaque ice you get from frozen seawater. This was clear, translucent, with a slight blue tint that seemed to come from inside it, rather than from the light hitting it. And it was glowing, faintly, barely perceptible, but definitely glowing with a soft blue-white luminescence that had nothing to do with my flashlight. Sarah came down the ladder behind me, and I heard her sharp intake of breath when she saw it. "Jesus Christ," she whispered. We both just stood there for a moment, maybe 10 feet away from the thing, neither of us wanting to get closer, because even from that distance we could feel it. That presence I mentioned before, that sensation of being watched by something vast and old and utterly other. It pressed against my mind like fingers pushing on a bruise, not quite painful, but deeply uncomfortable. The air felt thick, hard to breathe, and that ringing in my ears that had started upstairs in the bridge was getting louder. "We should take photos," Sarah said, her voice shaky. "Document this before we do anything else." She pulled out her phone, but when she tried to turn on the camera, the screen just flickered and died. That's weird. I had full battery. I tried mine. Same thing. Dead. Our helmet cameras were still recording, but something about being near this thing was draining electronic devices. "Forget the photos," I said. "Let's just look at it and get out." But even as I said it, I was moving closer. I couldn't help it. Something was pulling me toward that ice block, and my feet were moving before my brain could tell them to stop. As I got closer, details emerged that made my stomach clench. The ice wasn't uniform. There were layers and striations running through it, like you'd see in ancient glacier ice that had been compressed over thousands of years. But there were also air bubbles trapped inside, perfectly round and evenly distributed, like someone had designed it that way. And then there was what was inside the ice. At first, it was just a shadow, a dark shape that my eyes couldn't quite focus on. But as I moved closer, as my flashlight beam hit it from different angles, the shape resolved into something that made my brain stutter trying to process it. It was a figure, humanoid, definitely humanoid, but wrong in ways that were hard to articulate. I moved around to the side where the ice was clearest, wiped away a thin layer of frost with my gloved hand, and then I could see it clearly, and I stopped breathing. The figure was tall, at least 8 feet, maybe more. It was hard to judge exactly because it was suspended in the ice at a slight angle. The body was lean, elongated, with proportions that were almost human, but not quite. The torso was too long, the limbs too slender, the fingers on the hands. I could see one hand pressed against the ice like it had been trying to push out. The fingers were too long, with too many joints, but it was the face that locked me in place. Beautiful. That's the only word I have for it, and it doesn't even come close to describing what I saw. The face was masculine, or maybe feminine, or maybe both, or maybe neither. It shifted somehow depending on how the light hit it, like those optical illusions that show 2 different images depending on how you look at them. The features were perfect, symmetrical in a way that human faces never are, with high cheekbones, a straight nose, full lips that looked almost blue from the cold. The eyes were closed, long lashes resting against the cheeks, and I was suddenly terrified of what would happen if they opened. The hair was long, flowing around the face and shoulders, and it might have been white or platinum blonde. Through the blue-tinted ice, it was hard to tell. But here's what really made my knees weak, what made every hair on my body stand up in primal fear: the wings. 2 massive wings, each one at least 8 or 9 feet long, maybe more, folded against the back of the figure and pressed against the ice. They looked like bird wings, but also not like bird wings. The structure was similar, that same basic architecture of bone and feathers, but the feathers themselves looked wrong. Too symmetrical, too perfect, and they caught the light in a way that created tiny rainbow refractions, like they were made of ice crystals or glass or something that didn't exist in nature. One wing was folded tight against the back, but the other was partially spread, and I could see the individual feather structures, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all aligned perfectly. "Jake," Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "Jake, what is that?" I couldn't answer. My throat was closed, my mouth dry. I reached out without thinking, my hand moving toward the ice, and the moment my glove touched the surface, I felt it. That presence surged, rushed into my mind like water through a broken dam, and suddenly I wasn't standing in a cargo hold anymore. I was somewhere else, someone else. I saw flashes of images too fast to fully process. A sky that wasn't blue, geometric cities made of light, beings like the one in the ice but moving, flying, their wings leaving trails of fire in the air. I heard voices, thousands of them, singing in harmony, and the sound was so beautiful it made me want to weep and scream at the same time. And then I saw war. I saw those beings fighting each other, tearing each other apart in the sky, falling like stars, burning as they fell. I saw one of them, maybe the one in the ice, I couldn't tell, plummeting toward an ocean, wings torn and broken, hitting the water with such force it should have been destroyed. But instead, the water froze around it, instant and complete, encasing it in a tomb of ice that sank into the deep. And then I saw time passing, centuries compressed into seconds, the ice block drifting in the deep ocean, through currents and darkness, waiting, always waiting. For what? For someone to find it. For us. I jerked my hand back and stumbled backward, my head spinning, Sarah catching me before I fell. "Jake, are you okay?" I wasn't okay. I was about as far from okay as it's possible to be, but I heard myself saying, I'm fine, even though I could barely stand. The visions had stopped, but they'd left echoes, impressions that I knew would never fully fade, and I understood something that terrified me. This thing was alive. Not dead, not dormant, but alive and aware, and it had just shown me what it wanted me to see. It had communicated with me. Tommy's voice in my headset, urgent now. "Jake, we've got a problem. Wind's picking up fast. I'm getting crosswinds that are going to make it impossible to hold position. You need to abort and get back here now." I should have listened. God, I should have listened. But I was staring at that figure in the ice, at those closed eyes and those impossible wings. And I was thinking about the Russian crew, about how they died rather than stay near this thing, about how terrified they must have been in their final hours. And I made a decision that I've regretted every day since. "Sarah," I said, my voice sounding strange in my own ears, "we're taking it with us." She stared at me like I'd just suggested we burn down the ship and dance in the flames. "What?" "Jake, no, absolutely not. We don't know what this is. We don't know if it's dangerous. We can't just—" "Look at it," I interrupted, pointing at the ice block. "Look at it and tell me we can leave it here. What if another ship finds this vessel? What if salvage crews come looking? What if that ice melts and whatever is inside gets free without anyone around who knows what it is?" I was rationalizing, finding reasons to justify a decision that had already been made by something deeper than logic. We need to get this to people who can study it, contain it, figure out what it is. We can't just leave it floating around the Arctic. Sarah was shaking her head, backing away. "Jake, this is insane. This is the most insane thing I've ever heard. We're rescue personnel, not whatever this requires. We need to report it and let people who know what they're doing handle it." She was right. Completely, totally right. But I wasn't listening to her. I was listening to that presence in my mind, that voice that wasn't quite a voice, telling me, yes, take me, bring me back. It is time. Finally, after so long, it is time. "We're taking it," I said again, and I keyed my mic to Tommy. "Tommy, we found something big. We need to bring it back with us." There was a long pause. "Jake, we're already pushing our fuel margins. We can't take on extra weight. We don't have a choice. This is why the crew died. This is what we came here to find. We can't leave it." Another pause, longer this time. Then Tommy's voice resigned. "How big are we talking?" I looked at the ice block, did some quick mental math. 2 tons, give or take. Jesus Christ, Jake. That's gonna put us way over safe operating weight. In this weather, with that much extra mass, the chances of us making it back are maybe 50-50. Then we better beat the odds. I heard Tommy sigh, a long suffering sound I'd heard from him a dozen times before when I'd asked him to do something borderline suicidal. "All right, but if we crash into the Arctic Ocean, I'm going to kill you before the cold does." I almost laughed. Deal. Getting that ice block out of the cargo hold and onto the deck was one of the most physically demanding things I've ever done. And I've done a lot of hard shit in my career. The Russian vessel had a cargo crane, old and rusty but still functional, and we used it to lift the block up through the hatch. The whole process took 23 minutes. I remember because I was watching the clock on my wrist. watching our weather window close minute by minute, Tommy's increasingly stressed updates coming through my headset every 90 seconds. The ice block weighed more than I'd estimated, closer to 3 tons than 2, and the crane groaned and shuddered with the effort of lifting it. Sarah and I had to guide it, keep it from swinging and smashing into the bulkheads, and every time we touched it, even through insulated gloves, I felt that presence intensify. It was like touching a live electrical wire, except the current was going into my head instead of my body. By the time we got it onto the deck, both of us were shaking, not from the cold, but from whatever that thing was doing to our nervous systems. Sarah's nose was bleeding, thin trails of red running down to her lips, freezing almost instantly in the wind. She wiped at it absently, like she didn't even notice. That should have been a warning sign. That should have told me we were already in over our heads. But I was committed now, past the point of rational thought. Tommy brought the helicopter in low, fighting the crosswinds, the rotor wash blowing snow and ice in blinding sheets across the deck. He lowered the cargo hooks, thick steel cables with industrial-grade clasps, and I attached them to the rigging we'd wrapped around the ice block. My hands were numb even through the gloves, my fingers fumbling with the clips, and I kept having to blink snow out of my eyes. The whole time, I was hyper-aware of the figure inside the ice, those closed eyes just a few feet from where I was working, and I had this irrational terror that they were going to open, that I was going to look up and see them staring at me. But they stayed closed. The face remained peaceful, serene, almost meditative. Sarah was on the other side of the block, securing the second set of hooks, and I could see her lips moving, though I couldn't hear what she was saying over the wind. Later, she told me she was praying. She couldn't remember the words, couldn't remember what language she was praying in, just that it felt necessary. Like if she stopped, something terrible would happen. I know how that sounds. I know, but I felt it too. This overwhelming sense that we were performing some kind of ritual, following steps that had been laid out long before we arrived, actors in a play we didn't understand. We gave Tommy the signal, and he began to lift. The helicopter's engines screamed, the whole aircraft shuddering with the effort, and for a horrible moment I thought the cables were going to snap or the ice was going to break apart. But it held. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the block lifted off the deck, swaying in the wind like a massive pendulum. Sarah and I scrambled back, putting distance between us and the cargo, and then we moved to the pilot ladder to get off the ship. I went last, watching the ice block spin slowly beneath the helicopter, catching the pale Arctic light and fracturing it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. It was beautiful, terrifying, but beautiful. And as I climbed down onto the frozen sea ice where Tommy had originally dropped us off, I felt a wave of emotion that wasn't mine, gratitude, relief, and something else, something darker that I couldn't identify. The thing in the ice was happy. It wanted to leave this ship, wanted to go with us. And that realization made my blood run cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. What if we were doing exactly what it wanted? What if we'd been manipulated into this from the moment we entered that cargo hold? The flight back to Elmendorf-Richardson was, without exaggeration, the most terrifying 2.5 hours of my life. And that's saying something because I've been shot at. I've crashed in a helicopter before. I've pulled bodies out of burning wreckage while ammunition was cooking off all around me. But this was different. This was wrong on a fundamental level that my brain couldn't process. The moment we were airborne with that ice block swinging beneath us, every instrument in the helicopter started malfunctioning. Not failing completely, just glitching. The altimeter would jump up or down 50 feet randomly. The artificial horizon would tilt and spin even though we were flying level. The GPS coordinates would flicker and change, showing us in the middle of the Pacific Ocean 1 second and over Greenland the next. Tommy was flying manual, relying on his instruments when he could trust them, and his instincts when he couldn't, and I could see the strain on his face, sweat running down his temples despite the cold. "This is fucked," he kept muttering. "This is so fucked. What the hell is that thing doing to my bird?" I didn't have an answer. None of us did. We were in completely uncharted territory, operating on instinct and hope, and probably a fair amount of whatever influence that thing was exerting on our minds. About 40 minutes into the flight, Sarah did something I'll never forget. She unbuckled from her seat, which was a massive safety violation in weather like that, and moved to the door where she could look down at the ice block hanging beneath us. I grabbed her arm, tried to pull her back, but she shook me off with surprising strength. "I need to see it," she said, her voice strange, distant. "I need to understand." She leaned out, one hand gripping the doorframe, and stared down at the block of ice spinning slowly beneath us. And then she reached down. Impossible. We were 40 feet above it, but she reached down like she could touch it, and her whole body went rigid. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she started convulsing, and I had to grab her around the waist and haul her back inside before she fell out of the helicopter. I strapped her back into her seat, and she came back to consciousness slowly, blinking like she was waking from a dream. "What happened?" I demanded. "What did you see?" She looked at me, and her eyes were different somehow, like she was looking at me from very far away. "It has a heartbeat," she whispered. "Very slow, maybe one beat every 30 seconds, but it's there. I could feel it. Jake, that thing isn't dead. It's not even dormant. It's just waiting, conserving energy, waiting for the right moment." Her nose was bleeding again, heavier this time, and when I checked her pupils, they were dilated unevenly. She was showing signs of a head injury, even though nothing had hit her. Just being near that thing, opening herself up to it, had damaged something inside her brain. The radio started acting up about an hour into the flight. Static at first, just white noise that Tommy kept trying to tune out. But then the static started to have patterns in it, rhythms that almost sounded like speech. I had my headset on and I could hear it clearly. Not words exactly, but something close. Something that my brain kept trying to interpret as language. Tommy heard it too. I could tell by the way he kept adjusting the frequency, trying to find a clear channel. But every frequency was the same. That pulsing, rhythmic static that felt like it was trying to tell us something. And then, just for a moment, crystal clear through all the interference, I heard music. Not modern music, nothing I recognized, but something old. Something that sounded like it was being performed on instruments that didn't exist anymore. Strings and voices in harmony, rising and falling in patterns that were mathematically perfect and emotionally devastating. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, and then it was gone, replaced by static again. I looked back at Sarah and she was crying, tears streaming down her face, her lips moving silently. Later she told me she'd heard the same music, and it had reminded her of something she couldn't remember. Something from before she was born. I know how insane that sounds. Trust me, I know. We made it back to Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson running on fumes, literally. Tommy said later we had maybe 5 minutes of fuel left when we touched down, but we didn't land at the normal helicopter pad. Instead, we were directed to a restricted area on the far side of the base, a section I'd never been to in 8 years of being stationed there. As we approached, I could see lights, vehicles, people moving around with obvious purpose. Someone had been preparing for our arrival, which meant word had already gone up the chain of command about what we were bringing back. Tommy set us down gentle despite the wind and the weight and the malfunctioning instruments, and the moment the skids touched concrete, we were surrounded. Military police, officers I didn't recognize, people in hazmat suits, all of them moving with urgent efficiency. They unhooked the ice block before we'd even shut down the engines, loaded it onto a flatbed truck with crane assistance, covered it with heavy tarps that did nothing to hide what it was. I climbed out of the helicopter on shaky legs, Sarah right behind me, and we were immediately separated. "Sergeant Mercer, come with us, please." Not a request. An order delivered by a man in an unmarked uniform with the kind of bearing that screamed special operations or intelligence. Sarah was being led in a different direction by 2 MPs, looking back at me with wide, frightened eyes. They took me to a debriefing room, standard military gray walls and a metal table, made me hand over all my gear, my phone, my personal effects, left me alone for 20 minutes, probably watching through the mirror on the wall, letting me sweat. When the door finally opened, it wasn't the unmarked military guy. It was a woman in a civilian suit, late 40s maybe, with sharp eyes and the kind of face that didn't smile often. She sat down across from me, put a folder on the table but didn't open it. "Sergeant Mercer, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Hammond. I'm with a division of the Department of Defense that specializes in unusual situations. I need you to tell me everything that happened from the moment you received the distress call to the moment you landed here. Every detail, no matter how strange it seems. And I need you to understand that everything we discuss here is classified at the highest levels." "You cannot discuss this with anyone, including the other members of your team. Do you understand?" I understood. I understood that I'd stumbled into something way above my pay grade, something that people with more power and resources than me had been waiting for or preparing for. So I told her everything. The dead Russian crew with peaceful expressions, the captain's log and its final terrifying entry, the thing in the ice with its impossible wings, the visions I'd had when I touched it, the way it felt alive and aware, the music on the radio, all of it. She listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally, her expression never changing. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Sergeant Mercer," she finally said, "what you found today has implications that go far beyond a standard rescue operation. The object you recovered is being transferred to a secure facility where it can be properly studied and contained. For your own safety and the safety of this operation, you are being temporarily reassigned. You'll remain on base as a consultant, available to answer questions as needed. You will not attempt to contact Dr. Chen or Officer Delgado. You will not discuss this with anyone. Am I clear? I wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, wanted to know what the hell they thought that thing was and what they were going to do with it. But I was too tired, too overwhelmed, too rattled by everything that had happened, so I just nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Crystal clear." She stood up, gathered her folder. "Good. Someone will show you to your quarters. Get some rest, Sergeant. We'll have more questions for you tomorrow." She was almost to the door when I found my voice again. "Dr. Hammond." She turned back. "What is it? What did we bring back?" She looked at me for a long moment, and for just a second, I saw something in her eyes. Not fear exactly, but something close. Uncertainty. "We don't know yet," she said quietly. "But whatever it is, it's been waiting in that ice for a very, very long time. And now it's here. Now it's our problem." She left, and I was alone again, staring at that gray wall, wondering what the hell I'd done. They put me in temporary quarters, basically a barracks room with a bed and a desk and nothing else. No TV, no internet. My phone confiscated. I tried to sleep but couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face through the ice. Those closed eyes that I was certain were going to open. I got up after an hour of staring at the ceiling and went to the small window. It was dark now, nearly midnight, but I could see lights in the distance. The restricted area where they'd taken the ice block. Lots of activity, vehicles coming and going, the kind of urgency that told me they were moving it somewhere else. Where? I had no idea. Somewhere more secure, probably. Somewhere underground. Somewhere it could be studied without risk of what? Escape? Exposure? I didn't know. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. That thing was awake now. We'd moved it, exposed it to warmth and light and attention, and something had shifted. The hibernation or stasis or whatever it had been in for centuries was ending. And when it fully woke up, when those eyes finally opened, and that presence that had been pressing at the edges of my mind became fully focused, I didn't know what would happen, but I was terrified to find out. I stood at that window for hours, watching those distant lights, and I swear I could still feel it. Even with miles between us, even through concrete and steel and whatever they'd put between us, I could feel that thing's awareness touching mine. Like we were connected now. Like touching that ice had created a bond that distance couldn't break. And in the quiet of that room, I heard it whisper again. That voice that came from inside my own head. "Soon, very soon, and then you will see. You will understand. You will know what you really are." I didn't sleep at all that night. They moved the ice block to a facility beneath the base that I didn't even know existed. I'd been stationed at Elmendorf-Richardson for 8 years. Thought I knew every building, every hangar, every restricted area. But this was something else, something that wasn't on any map I'd ever seen. Day 1, around Urus 600 hours, Dr. Hammond came to my quarters and told me to get dressed, that they wanted me in the observation room. I followed her through a series of corridors that required 3 different security clearances, each checkpoint manned by guards who looked at me like I was a potential threat. We took an elevator down, and I mean really down. The floor indicator went past B1, B2, B3, all the way to B7 before it finally stopped. I'd never been 7 floors underground before. The air pressure change made my ears pop. When the doors opened, we stepped into a corridor that looked more like a hospital than a military facility. All white walls and fluorescent lighting and the smell of disinfectant. Dr. Daume, Hammond led me to a room with a large observation window, and on the other side of that window was a laboratory that looked like something out of a science fiction movie. And in the center of that lab, sitting on a reinforced platform surrounded by equipment I couldn't begin to identify, was the ice block. Even through the thick observation glass, even with all that distance and barrier between us, I could feel it, that presence, pressing against my consciousness like a hand against a window. The scientists in the lab, there had to be at least 20 of them, all in white clean suits, were moving around it, taking measurements, setting up instruments, and I wondered if they could feel it too, or if I was special somehow. If touching it directly had opened something in me that couldn't be closed. Dr. Hammond gestured to a chair in front of the observation window. "Sit, Sergeant Mercer. You're going to be here a while." I sat, and for the next 12 hours, I watched them try to understand what we'd brought back. The first thing they attempted was thermal imaging, pointing cameras at the ice block that measured heat signatures. The screens showed something that made the scientists confer in urgent, hushed tones. The ice block wasn't just cold, it was generating cold. The temperature at its surface was minus 40 degrees Celsius, but the ice itself was somehow pulling heat out of the surrounding air, creating a sphere of cold around it that their climate control systems were struggling to compensate for. One scientist, a thin man with glasses that kept fogging up, suggested they try to melt it, start peeling back layers to get to whatever was inside. They brought in an industrial cutting torch, the kind used to slice through steel, and aimed it at one corner of the ice block. The flame was bright blue, hot enough that I could see the air shimmering around it even through the observation window. But the ice didn't melt. It didn't even soften. The torch heated the surface until it glowed, but the moment they pulled the flame away, the glow faded, and the ice was exactly as it had been, unchanged, unaffected. Like the laws of thermodynamics just didn't apply to whatever this thing was made of. Sarah was there, in the observation room with me. They'd brought her in around 800 hours, had her sit on the other side of the room, and for the first few hours, we weren't allowed to talk to each other. But I could see her in my peripheral vision, see the way she was leaning forward, staring at the ice block with an intensity that was almost frightening. Around noon, Dr. Hammond left the room to confer with someone, and the moment the door closed behind her, Sarah got up and moved to the chair next to mine. "Jake," she whispered, her voice urgent. "Are you sleeping?" I shook my head. "Not really. Maybe an hour or two. You?" "No, I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see things. Things that shouldn't be possible." She was gripping the armrest so hard her knuckles were white. "I see cities that don't exist, geometric and perfect and made of something that looks like crystal or light. I see beings like the one in there, hundreds of them, thousands, all flying in perfect formation across skies that aren't our sky. And I see them fighting, tearing each other apart, and I can hear them screaming, and it sounds like music, Jake. Like the most beautiful and most terrible music ever composed. And I wake up crying, and I don't know why. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw what I'd been too preoccupied to notice before. She'd lost weight, maybe 10 pounds in just a day. Her face was gaunt, her eyes sunken with dark circles underneath. Her hands were trembling slightly, constantly. "Sarah, you need to tell them. You need medical attention." She laughed, a brittle sound with no humor in it. I did tell them. They ran every test they could think of. MRI, CT scan, blood work, neurological exam. Everything came back normal. There's nothing physically wrong with me, Jake, except I'm being shown things by something that's been dead for thousands of years. Day 2 was when they brought in the really serious equipment. A laser system, industrial grade, mounted on a robotic arm that could be precisely controlled from outside the lab. They were going to try to drill into the ice, take a core sample, analyze its molecular structure. I watched them set it up, calibrate the laser, run through safety checks. When they finally activated it, the beam was so bright it left after images on my retinas even through the observation glass. They focused it on a single point on the ice block, maximum intensity, and for a moment, I thought it was going to work. The ice began to glow where the laser hit it, that same blue-white luminescence I'd seen on the ship, but brighter, more intense. The scientists were excited, murmuring to each other, adjusting their instruments to capture whatever data they could. But then, something changed. The glow spread, moving across the surface of the ice like liquid light, and suddenly, every piece of electronic equipment in the lab started malfunctioning. Monitors went dark, computers shut down, the laser itself flickered and died. The scientists scrambled, trying to restore power, and through the observation window, I could see the concern on their faces turning to fear. Because the ice block was glowing brighter now, pulsing with that inner light, and the figure inside, those closed eyes, that serene face, seemed to be moving. Not much, just a slight shift, like someone stirring in their sleep. The temperature in the observation room dropped 20 degrees in about 10 seconds. Our breath fogging, frost forming on the observation glass, and then it stopped. The glow faded, the equipment came back online, and everything returned to normal. Except, it wasn't normal. We'd pissed it off, or woken it slightly, or done something that it didn't like. Dr. Hammond was in the room by then, and she looked shaken in a way I hadn't seen before. She got on a phone, had a terse conversation with someone, then turned to me and Sarah. "We're suspending direct testing for 24 hours. Whatever this is, it's reactive to certain stimuli, and we need to understand the parameters before we risk another incident." Sarah stood up, her voice sharp. "Another incident? That wasn't an incident, that was a warning. That thing in there just told you, in the clearest possible terms, not to fuck with it. And you're going to do it anyway, aren't you?" Dr. Hammond's face hardened. "Dr. Chen, I understand you're under stress, but I need you to remember that this situation is classified and you don't have the full picture. Decisions are being made at levels far above both of us. Our job is to gather data and provide recommendations." "And what are you going to recommend?" Sarah shot back. "That we keep poking it until it really wakes up? Until it decides we're a threat? You have no idea what you're dealing with here. None of us do." She was right, and I think Dr. Hammond knew it. But the machine was already in motion, and neither of us had the power to stop it. They did manage to get one sample, though. Not from the ice block itself, but from the water that had melted off it during transport. One of the scientists, a woman whose name I never learned, had collected maybe 30 milliliters in a sterile vial and run it through every analysis she could think of. The results came back on day 2, and they didn't make sense. The water had a molecular structure that was just slightly different from normal H2O. There were extra hydrogen bonds, arranged in geometric patterns that shouldn't be stable at any temperature. And there was something else in it, trace amounts of something that didn't register on any known spectrum analysis. Organic compounds that resembled proteins but weren't proteins, arranged in patterns that looked almost like DNA but with 6 base pairs instead of 4. The scientist gave a presentation about it in the observation room, showing us graphs and charts that I barely understood. But the conclusion was clear. Whatever this ice was, it wasn't natural. It had been engineered, constructed, designed by something with a level of technology that we couldn't comprehend. "It's like a stasis pod," she explained, pointing at a molecular diagram on her tablet. "The ice isn't just frozen water, it's a containment system. It's designed to preserve whatever is inside it indefinitely, keeping it in a state of suspended animation while simultaneously protecting it from external threats. And it's smart, reactive, capable of defending itself. We've never seen anything like this. Nothing in the archaeological record, nothing in any ancient texts, nothing that even comes close. That night, day 2 transitioning to day 3, I had the worst dreams yet. I don't even want to call them dreams because they felt too real, too vivid, too detailed to be products of my subconscious. I was flying, soaring through a sky that was the wrong color, more purple than blue, with 3 suns hanging in it like burning eyes. I had wings, massive wings that caught the air and propelled me forward at impossible speeds, and I could feel every feather, every muscle, every bone. I wasn't alone. There were others with me, hundreds of them, all flying in formation, all singing in that harmonic language I'd heard on the helicopter radio. We were going to war. I could feel the anticipation, the righteous fury, the absolute certainty that we were doing what was necessary. Below us was a city, geometric and beautiful, made of crystal structures that touched the clouds. And in that city were others, rebels, traitors, those who had refused to obey. We descended on them like a storm, and the battle that followed was beyond anything I have words for. Fire and lightning, bodies falling like stars, screams that shattered the air itself. I felt myself struck, felt my wings torn, felt the agony of falling from that impossible height. And then the cold, the impact with water that immediately froze around me, the sensation of sinking into darkness, into silence, into sleep that would last for thousands of years. I woke up screaming, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. And I knew with absolute certainty that what I'd just experienced wasn't a dream. It was a memory, his memory. The thing in the ice had shown me what happened to it, why it had fallen, how it had ended up frozen in the Arctic Ocean for millennia. Day 3 was when everything started to accelerate. I woke up, if you can call lying in bed with your eyes open for 6 hours, sleeping, with this overwhelming sense of urgency, this knowledge that something was about to happen. I couldn't explain it, couldn't justify it. but it was as certain as gravity. I got dressed in the dark, 0400 hours, and made my way down to the observation room without waiting for Dr. Hammond to collect me. The guards at the checkpoints tried to stop me, but I had clearance now, and they reluctantly let me through. When I got to the observation room, Sarah was already there, standing with her face pressed against the glass, staring at the ice block. She didn't turn when I entered, just said, "You feel it too." It wasn't a question. "Yeah, something's different. Something's changed." "It's ready," she whispered. "After 3 days, it's ready to wake up. I don't know how I know that, but I do. And Jake, I'm terrified. I'm more scared right now than I've ever been in my entire life, because I think when it wakes up, when those eyes open, everything is going to change. Everything we think we know about the world, about ourselves, about God and creation and our place in the universe, it's all going to be different." I stood next to her, both of us staring at that figure in the ice, and I could see what she meant. The ice looked different, clearer somehow, the glow more pronounced. And the face, those serene features, those closed eyes, they looked less like they were frozen and more like they were just resting, like someone taking a nap who was about to wake up any second. The lab was empty of scientists at this hour, just a couple of technicians monitoring equipment, and the ice block sat there in its refrigerated containment, waiting. Waiting for what? I didn't know, but I could feel it building, like the pressure before a thunderstorm, like the tension in the air before an earthquake. Something was about to break. Sarah turned to me, and in the dim light of the observation room, she looked almost ethereal herself, like she was halfway between this world and somewhere else. "Jake, I need to tell you something. I need to tell you before it's too late, before I lose the ability to trust my own perceptions. I've been seeing things when I'm awake now, not just when I sleep. Shadows that move wrong, lights that flicker at the edge of my vision. And yesterday, I swear, I heard voices in a language I don't know but somehow understand. And the worst part is, I think it's getting into my head. I think it's rewriting something in my brain, changing me on a fundamental level, because I'm not scared of it anymore. I should be terrified, we both should be, but instead I feel this overwhelming sense of peace, like everything is going according to plan. Like this is how it's supposed to be." She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in hard. "Promise me something. Promise me that if I start acting strange, if I say things that don't make sense, you'll remember who I was before we found it, before it got into our heads. Promise me you'll remember that whatever happens next, we didn't choose this. We were chosen." I promised, even though I wasn't sure I could keep it, because the truth was, I felt it too. That peace she was talking about, that sense of rightness, and it scared me more than anything else that had happened because it meant we were already compromised, already changing into something other than what we'd been. The scientists would show up in a few hours and resume their tests, and something told me that today would be different. Today, after 3 days of waiting, something would finally happen. The ice would crack, or the figure would move, or those eyes would open. And when they did, I suspected that nothing would ever be the same again. I stood there with Sarah in the pre-dawn darkness, staring at that impossible thing we'd pulled from the Arctic Ocean, and I waited. We both waited, for the moment when everything would change, for the moment when we'd finally understand what we'd really brought back, and for the moment when we'd have to decide if we were ready for the truth, whatever it turned out to be. Spoiler alert, we weren't ready, not even close. The alarm started at exactly 02:33 hours on day 4. I know the exact time because I was staring at the clock on the wall when they went off, had been staring at it for the past 2 hours, unable to sleep. That sense of anticipation so strong it felt like electricity running through my veins. The sound was deafening, a klaxon that echoed through the entire underground facility, and I was on my feet and moving before my conscious mind even registered what was happening. I grabbed my jacket, didn't bother with shoes, just ran barefoot down the corridor toward the elevator. Other people were emerging from rooms, personnel in various states of dress, all of them looking confused and alarmed, but I knew, somehow, I knew exactly what those alarms meant. It was awake. After 3 days of waiting, of testing, of prodding and analyzing, the thing in the ice had finally decided it was time. The elevator seemed to take forever, and when the doors finally opened on B7, I was hit with a wave of cold air so intense it took my breath away. The temperature down here had to be 20 below zero, and I could see frost forming on every surface, my breath coming out in great billowing clouds. The corridor lights were flickering, and there was this sound, this low-frequency hum that I felt in my bones more than heard, Like the whole building was resonating at some frequency that human structures weren't designed to handle. I ran toward the observation room, my feet numb on the frozen floor, and I could see other people converging from different directions. Security personnel with weapons drawn, scientists in lab coats, Dr. Hammond in a full sprint despite her age. We all reached the observation room at roughly the same time, and what I saw through that window made my legs go weak. The ice block was gone. Not broken, not shattered, just gone. There was a pool of water on the floor of the lab, maybe 3 inches deep, spreading out from where the block had been, and standing in the center of that water, with its back to us, was the figure. It was standing, upright, moving. The thing that had been frozen in ice for God knows how many centuries was free, and it was real. And it was in a laboratory 7 floors beneath an Air Force base in Alaska. I heard someone behind me make a sound, half gasp and half sob, and I realized it was Sarah. She'd made it down here too, and she was gripping the observation window frame so hard I could hear her fingernails scraping against the metal. The figure was tall, impossibly tall, at least 8 feet, maybe taller. It was hard to judge exactly because of the way it stood, the way it moved. The body was humanoid but elongated. The proportions just slightly wrong in a way that made my brain struggle to process what I was seeing. The skin was pale, almost luminescent in the harsh lab lighting, with a faint blue undertone like it was lit from within. And the wings. God, the wings. They were folded against its back, but even folded they were massive, the tips dragging slightly in the water. Feathers that looked like they were made of ice crystals or glass or something that caught the light and refracted it into tiny rainbows. The scientists in the lab were frozen in place, and I mean that literally. They were standing like statues, some of them with their mouths open, some with hands raised like they'd been gesturing when time stopped. There were security personnel in there too, at least 4 of them, and they all had their weapons raised, pointing at the figure, but nobody was shooting. Nobody was moving at all. It was like everyone in that room had been paralyzed, held in place by some force I couldn't see. The only movement was the figure itself, and it was moving slowly, carefully, like someone testing their body after a long sleep. It flexed its hands, long fingers with too many joints spreading wide then curling into fists. It rolled its shoulders and the wings rustled, water dripping from the feathers and hitting the floor with sounds like breaking glass. And then it turned, slowly, deliberately. It turned to face us, to face the observation window, and I got my first clear look at its face. I'm going to try to describe it, but I need you to understand that words are inadequate here. Language wasn't designed to capture something like this. The face was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, beauty so perfect and alien that it was almost painful, masculine and feminine simultaneously, or maybe neither, maybe something beyond those categories. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, full lips that were slightly parted, a straight nose, and skin so flawless it looked like porcelain. The hair was long, falling past its shoulders, and it was white, not gray or silver but pure white, like fresh snow. But it was the eyes that destroyed me, the eyes that made me understand, on a level deeper than thought, that I was looking at something that was never meant to exist in the same reality as me. The eyes were open, and they were glowing. Not metaphorically, not poetically, but actually emitting light, a soft golden amber radiance that seemed to pulse in time with some rhythm I could feel in my chest. The irises were too large, taking up most of the visible eye, and they had this quality like they were made of liquid metal constantly shifting and swirling. And when those eyes fixed on me, because they did, they looked right at me through the observation window, found me among all the other people gathered there. I felt like I was being seen all the way down to my soul, like every thought I'd ever had, every choice I'd ever made, every secret I'd ever kept was suddenly laid bare before something infinitely older and wiser than me. I couldn't breathe. I literally couldn't make my lungs work. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears, and I felt tears running down my face without knowing why I was crying. This was terror, yes, but it was also something else. Awe. The kind of awe that ancient humans must have felt standing at the base of a mountain or watching a thunderstorm roll in. That primal recognition that you are small, and the universe is vast and incomprehensible. Dr. Hammond was on her phone, speaking in rapid, urgent tones to someone, probably trying to activate whatever emergency protocols existed for a situation like this. But I barely registered her voice. All I could focus on was the being in the lab, the angel. because that's what it was. I couldn't pretend anymore that it was anything else, as it surveyed its surroundings with those terrible, beautiful eyes. And then it spoke. Not with its mouth. Its lips didn't move. Its throat didn't vibrate. But the voice was there nonetheless, resonating inside my skull, inside all of our skulls simultaneously. I know because later, when we compared notes, everyone heard the same thing at the same time. The voice was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Somehow both masculine and feminine, both young and ancient, both gentle and commanding. It had harmonics to it, overtones and undertones that normal human vocal cords couldn't produce, like multiple voices speaking in perfect unison. And it spoke in English, perfectly clear English, though I had the distinct impression that it wasn't actually speaking English, that it was communicating in some more fundamental language, and our brains were translating it into words we could understand. The first word it said, that voice echoing in my head, bypassing my ears entirely, was a question. Quanto tempo? No, wait, that's wrong. It was in English. How long? 2 words, simple words, but loaded with so much weight, so much emotion, confusion, sadness, weariness, like someone waking from a coma and trying to piece together what happened while they were gone. The voice reverberated through the observation room, and I saw several people stagger, grab onto whatever was nearest for support. One scientist, a young guy I'd seen taking measurements the day before, just dropped to his knees, hands over his ears, even though covering your ears wouldn't help, because the voice wasn't coming through your ears in the first place. Nobody answered. We were all too shocked, too overwhelmed, too fundamentally unprepared for this moment despite having had 3 days to mentally prepare for it. The angel, I'm just going to call it that from now on because I don't have a better word, tilted its head slightly, a gesture that was both human and utterly alien, and repeated the question. How long have I been asleep? The words were clearer this time, more focused, and I felt them like a physical pressure against my mind. It was asking all of us, but somehow I knew it was particularly asking me, because I was the one who had found it, because I had touched the ice, had opened myself to it, had created that connection. I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. My tongue wasn't working. Sarah managed it first, her voice shaky but audible. We don't know. Centuries, maybe thousands of years. The angel's eyes moved to her, fixed on her with that penetrating gaze, and I saw Sarah go rigid, saw her hands clench into fists at her sides. Thousands, the angel repeated, and the word carried such profound sadness that I felt my chest ache in sympathy. I have missed so much. The world has changed beyond recognition. Your clothing, your technology, even the air tastes different, more corrupted, more heavy with choices made and consequences ignored. It looked around the lab, taking in the equipment, the cameras, the armed guards still frozen in place. You imprisoned me, studied me, feared me. This is understandable. I would do the same, were our positions reversed. The being took a step forward, its foot splashing in the water that had been its prison, and even that simple movement was wrong, too graceful, too fluid, like it was moving through a medium less resistant than air. The wings rustled again, and I got a better sense of their scale. Each wing had to be at least 12 feet long, maybe more, covered in those impossible feathers that looked like they were carved from crystal or frozen light. When the light hit them right, they created rainbow halos, prismatic effects that hurt to look at directly. You have questions, the angel said, and it wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. I can feel them pressing against my consciousness, like waves against a shore. Who am I? What am I? Why was I in the ice? What do I want? Am I dangerous? Should you kill me while you have the chance? With each question, I felt a spike of recognition, because those were exactly the questions racing through my mind. I will answer what I can, but first, I need one of you to speak with me directly. Not through this barrier, it gestured at the observation window, but face to face. I need to understand how much has changed, how much time has truly passed, and I need to know if you are ready to hear the truth. The eyes fixed on me again. You, the one who found me, the soldier with death in his past and doubt in his heart. You will come speak with me. The others may watch, may listen, but you and I must have words. Dr. Hammond grabbed my arm before I could move. Absolutely not. Sergeant Mercer, you are not going in there. We have no idea what that thing is capable of, what it might do. But even as she said it, I was pulling away from her, moving toward the door that led into the lab, because I had to. Not because I wanted to. Every survival instinct I had was screaming at me to run in the opposite direction, but because I had no choice. The angel had called me, had selected me, and refusing wasn't an option. It was like being pulled by a rope I couldn't see, compelled by a force stronger than my will. Sarah tried to stop me too, stepping in front of me, her eyes wild with fear. "Jake, don't. Please don't. We don't know what it wants. It could kill you. It could do worse than kill you." I looked at her. This woman I'd known for less than a week, but who felt like she'd been in my life forever, because we'd shared this impossible experience. "I have to, Sarah. You know I have to. If I don't go in there, if I don't talk to it, we'll never get answers. And besides," I tried to smile, but it felt wrong on my face. "I don't think it wants to hurt me. I think it's lonely. I think it's been alone in the dark and the cold for so long that it's desperate for connection, for understanding. I think it needs us as much as we need to understand it." I didn't know if that was true, or if the angel was feeding me that belief, planting that thought in my mind to make me compliant. But it didn't matter. I was going in. The door to the lab required a key card and a fingerprint scan, and Dr. Hammond could have stopped me, could have refused to let me through, but she didn't. She pulled out her card, pressed her thumb to the scanner, and the lock clicked open. "If anything happens," she said quietly, "if you give any signal that you're in distress, we're flooding that room with sedative gas and extracting you by force. Understood?" I nodded, even though I suspected that if the angel wanted to hurt me, sedative gas wouldn't do much to stop it. I pushed open the door and stepped into the lab. The temperature difference was shocking. It had to be 40 degrees colder in here than in the observation room, cold enough that my breath fogged thick and my exposed skin immediately started to ache. The air felt heavy, pressurized, like I was underwater, and the presence of the angel, which had been strong even through the observation window, was now overwhelming. It pressed against my mind from all directions, vast and ancient and utterly other. The being stood about 15 feet away from me, still as a statue, those golden eyes fixed on me. Up close, it was even more impossible than it had seemed through the glass. The details were too perfect, too precise, like it had been designed rather than born. And I could feel power radiating from it. Not heat or electricity, but something else. Something that made my hindbrain scream that I was in the presence of a predator infinitely more dangerous than me. But I took a step forward anyway, then another, until I was standing close enough that I could have reached out and touched it, close enough to see my reflection in those liquid metal eyes, and in a voice that barely qualified as a whisper, I said the only thing I could think of. "Welcome back." The angel looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in those eyes, some emotion I couldn't name. And then, for the first time, its lips moved, forming words, even though the voice still resonated directly in my mind. "Thank you," it said, and the weight of genuine gratitude in those words nearly brought me to my knees. "Thank you for bringing me back, for finding me in the deep places where I had fallen, for giving me the chance to speak again, to see again, to understand what has become of the world I left behind. You have given me a gift, soldier, whether you know it or not, and I will give you one in return. I will give you truth, whether you want it or not, whether you can bear it or not. Because truth is all I have left to offer." It reached out one long-fingered hand, palm up, in a gesture of offering. "My name is complex, and your tongue cannot shape it, but you may call me Azrael. It is close enough. And you, soldier of a nation that did not exist when I last walked this earth, what name do you carry?" I swallowed hard, my mouth desert dry. "Jake Mercer." "Jake," the angel repeated, and hearing my name in that voice that wasn't quite a voice did something strange to my chest. "Then let us speak, Jake Mercer. Let us speak of time and loss and the burden of witness. Let us speak of why I fell and why I have returned, and what it means for your species that I am no longer sleeping. And then, when we are done, you may decide whether you wish I had remained in the ice forever." Standing that close to Azrael, close enough to see the faint patterns that moved beneath his skin like circuits of light, close enough to feel the cold radiating from him in waves, I realized that everything I thought I knew about the world was wrong. Not slightly wrong, not mistaken in the details, but fundamentally, catastrophically wrong. This being in front of me shouldn't exist according to any scientific principle I'd ever learned. The laws of physics, biology, thermodynamics, they all seemed to bend around him like light around a black hole. His chest wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. But he was alive. More alive than anything I'd ever encountered, radiating a presence so intense it made the air vibrate. Behind me, through the observation window, I could see faces pressed against the glass. Dr. Hammond, Sarah, dozens of others, all watching this first contact between human and whatever Azrael was. Their expressions ranged from terror to fascination to something that looked like religious ecstasy. I didn't blame them. I was feeling all of those things simultaneously, my brain struggling to process contradictory emotions, my body pumping adrenaline even though I wasn't sure if I should fight or flee or fall to my knees. Azrael hadn't moved since I'd entered, hadn't shifted position or made any threatening gesture, but I could feel his attention focused on me like a physical weight, like being examined under a microscope by something infinitely more complex than the microscope itself. "You're afraid," Azrael said, and it wasn't a question, just a statement of fact delivered in that voice that resonated in my bones. "This is good. Fear means you understand, at least partially, what you're dealing with. Fear means your survival instincts are intact. Many of your kind would have approached me with foolish confidence, believing themselves safe because they have weapons or numbers, or faith in their own superiority. But you know better. You've seen death. You've felt the weight of mortality. This makes you wiser than most." He tilted his head again, studying me with those liquid gold eyes, and I had the uncomfortable sensation that he was reading my thoughts, peeling back layers of my consciousness like pages in a book. "You were a soldier. You have killed. You have saved. You carry guilt for both actions, even though one is considered noble and the other necessary. This dichotomy troubles you. You wonder if the lives you saved balance against the lives you took, if there's some cosmic ledger where such things are measured. You wonder if God, if he exists, judges you for your choices, or simply observes them with indifference." Every word was true, cutting through my defenses like they weren't there, exposing thoughts I'd barely admitted to myself. I wanted to ask how he knew these things, but the answer was obvious. He was reading me, seeing into me, understanding me on a level that was deeply violating and strangely comforting at the same time. "I'm not here to hurt you," Azrael continued, his voice gentler now, almost compassionate. "I know that's what you fear most in this moment, that I will prove to be hostile, that I will attack, that I will demonstrate that humanity was right to fear the unknown. But violence is not my purpose. It never was, though I was capable of it when necessary. I am here because you brought me here, because after so long in the dark and the cold and the silence, I was found, and now I must understand what has become of the world I left behind. I must know if my sacrifice meant anything, or if it was all for nothing." The sadness in his voice was overwhelming, a grief so profound, it made my chest ache in sympathy. "So I will ask you questions, Soldier Jake, and you will answer them truthfully. And then, if you wish, you may ask me questions, and I will answer them truthfully as well. This is how we will build understanding between us, through exchange of information, through honesty, through the acknowledgement that we are both lost in our own ways, seeking meaning in a universe that may have none to offer." He gestured with one long-fingered hand toward the observation window, where faces still pressed against the glass. "But first, I need them to leave. Not you. You will stay. But the others, they radiate too much fear, too much aggression, too much noise in their thoughts. It makes it difficult for me to focus. Ask them to go. Tell them that I will not harm you, that I will speak only with you, and that when we are finished, you may share what you have learned." I turned to face the observation window, saw Dr. Hammond's face pressed so close to the glass her breath was fogging it. I couldn't hear her through the soundproofing, but I could read her lips clearly. "Get out of there. Now." I shook my head, then made a pushing motion with my hands, trying to convey that everyone should leave. Dr. Hammond looked like she wanted to argue, but after a moment she nodded curtly and started ushering people away from the window. Sarah was the last to go, and I could see tears running down her face, though I couldn't tell if they were from fear or something else. Within a minute, the observation room was empty, and I was alone in the lab with an angel who had been dead, or sleeping, or frozen, or whatever state he'd been in, for thousands of years. The silence was profound. All I could hear was my own heartbeat, my own breathing, and that low-frequency hum that seemed to emanate from Azrael himself, a sound like the universe singing at a pitch just below human hearing. "Thank you," Azrael said, and I realized with a start that this was the first time he'd shown gratitude. The presence of many minds is difficult for me, especially after so long alone. It's like standing in a room where everyone is shouting at once. Your mind, singular and focused, is easier to bear. Now, ask me your question, the one that burns brightest in your thoughts. Ask me who I am. I swallowed hard, my throat still dry despite the cold air. Who are you? What are you? The questions came out rougher than I intended, almost aggressive, but Azrael didn't seem offended. I am a witness, he said simply. That is the closest translation your language has for what I was created to be. An observer of humanity, a recorder of your choices, your triumphs, your failures. I was made, and yes, I was made, not born, created with purpose and intention by forces you do not have words for, to watch over your species during a critical period in your development. The time you call, I do not know your calendar, but it was long ago, before your cities of glass and metal, before your weapons that can split atoms, when you still lived in smaller numbers, closer to the earth, closer to what you were meant to be. He paused, seeming to search for words. I was one of many. We were sent to observe, to record, to bear witness to the great experiment. That is what your species is, Soldier Jake. An experiment in free will, in choice, in what happens when consciousness is given complete freedom to choose its own path, without interference, without guidance, without the restraining hand of those who made you. Some of my kind believed this experiment was cruel. Others believed it was the greatest gift ever given. I believed both. I still do. His wings shifted slightly, feathers rustling like wind through crystal chimes. But I am no longer only a witness. I am also a participant, because I made a choice that violated my purpose, that broke the rules I was created to follow. And for that choice, I fell. Literally fell from the heights where my kind dwells, down into your world, into your ocean, into the ice that preserved me until you found me. What choice? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What did you do that made you fall? Azrael's eyes closed for a moment, and I saw pain flicker across those perfect features. I interfered. I broke the cardinal rule of witness. I tried to change what I was only meant to observe. There was a war, not between your kind, but between mine. A division among those who watch over you. Some believed that humanity had been given too much freedom, that you were destroying yourselves and the world you'd been given, that intervention was necessary to save you from your own nature. Others believed that intervention would invalidate the entire experiment, that you must be allowed to succeed or fail on your own merits. I tried to stand between them, tried to find a middle path, tried to warn humanity of what was coming without actually intervening. And for that presumption, for that arrogance in believing I could balance on the edge of the rules without breaking them, I was struck down, cast into the sea, frozen by my own people to prevent me from doing further damage. He opened his eyes again, and the sadness in them was so profound, I felt tears on my own face. I have been asleep for thousands of years, Soldier Jake, and now I am awake. And I do not yet know if this is a blessing or a curse, for me or for you. I stood there, trying to process what he'd just told me, my mind reeling. An experiment. Humanity was an experiment in free will. Angels, or whatever these beings were, watching us, recording us, forbidden from interfering. Some of them wanting to intervene, others insisting on non-interference, and Azrael caught in the middle. It was too much. It was too big. My brain kept trying to reject it, to find some rational explanation, but standing here in front of this impossible being, I couldn't deny what my senses were telling me. So you're saying, I managed, my voice shaking, that God exists, that He created us as some kind of test, that angels are real and they've been watching us this whole time. Azrael made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had held any humor. Your questions assume a framework that doesn't quite match reality. Does God exist? I do not know. I was created by something, but I do not know if that something is what you call God. Are angels real? I am real, as you can see, but whether I match your theological concept of an angel is questionable. Have we been watching? Yes, always. Every moment of your history has been observed, recorded, archived, but not for the reasons you might think, not because we're judging you or testing you for some heavenly reward. We're watching because you're fascinating, because you're unprecedented, because no other species in all of creation has ever been given what you've been given, absolute freedom to choose, and we want to see what you'll do with it. That's insane, I said, and I heard my voice rising. Anger mixing with fear, mixing with something that might have been despair. You're telling me that we're some kind of cosmic reality show? That we're being watched for entertainment while we suffer and die and destroy each other? Azrael's expression didn't change, but I felt his presence intensify, like he was paying even closer attention now. Not entertainment, documentation, understanding. How does a species with free will develop? What choices does it make? What patterns emerge? What potential is realized or squandered? These are questions that matter beyond your world, beyond your comprehension. Your species is young, Soldier Jake. So very young. You think you've been around for a long time because you measure in thousands of years. But the universe measures in billions. In that scale, you are infants. Infants given terrible power, the power to choose, with no instruction manual. And we watch to see if you'll figure it out, if you'll learn to use your freedom wisely, or if you'll destroy yourselves with it. Most of my kind believe you'll destroy yourselves. They give you another few centuries at most before you render your world uninhabitable or annihilate yourselves with your weapons. Some believe you'll transcend, evolve beyond your violent tendencies, reach for the stars. I used to believe that. Now, after so long away, after waking to find that you still wage war, still kill each other over resources and ideologies and ancient grievances, I'm not sure what I believe anymore. We stood in silence for a moment, and I realized my hands were shaking, not from cold, though the lab was still freezing, but from the weight of what I was hearing. Everything I thought I knew about humanity's place in the universe was being rewritten. We weren't alone. We'd never been alone. We'd always been watched, always been recorded, always been under observation by beings that saw us as test subjects in an experiment we didn't even know we were part of. You said you tried to warn us, I said finally. Warn us about what? What was coming? Azrael's wings spread slightly, a reflex action that sent ripples of prismatic light across the lab walls. A judgment, not in the religious sense, but in the practical sense. There was a point, long ago, when my kind seriously considered intervention. Humanity was destroying itself, wiping out entire cultures, poisoning its own environment, and the consensus was building that the experiment had failed, that you needed to be reset, guided back to a more sustainable path, even if it meant removing your free will to do so. I tried to warn your ancestors, tried to give them knowledge that might help them choose differently, choose better. For that interference, I was punished, and the judgment never came, not because humanity earned a reprieve, but because my fellow watchers couldn't agree on what form the intervention should take. So they did nothing, and you continued on your path, for better or worse. He fixed me with those golden eyes, and I felt the full force of his attention like a physical pressure. Now I am awake, and I do not know what I will find when I look upon your world. Have you learned? Have you grown? Have you proven the skeptics wrong? Or are you still on the path to self-destruction, still making the same mistakes, just with more sophisticated weapons? I must know, Soldier Jake. I must understand what has become of the species I was created to observe. And you, who found me, who brought me back, you will be my guide to this new world. You will show me what humanity has become, and then I will decide if there is still hope for you. The implication hung in the air between us, heavy and ominous. He would decide. Not God, not some distant, unknowable force, but this being in front of me would decide if humanity deserved to continue, or if we'd failed the experiment. The responsibility of that, the weight of it, made my knees weak. That's not fair, I said, and I was surprised by the anger in my voice. You can't put that kind of decision on one person. I'm not qualified to show you what humanity is. I'm just a soldier. I've seen the worst of us, the violence and the cruelty and the waste. If you judge us based on what I know, you'll condemn us for sure. Azrael tilted his head, and for the first time, I saw something that might have been surprise in his expression. You think I would judge you based only on your testimony. You misunderstand, Soldier Jake. I will observe for myself. I will walk among your kind, see what you have built and what you have destroyed, speak with many and draw my own conclusions. But you will be my first guide, my first teacher in this new age. And yes, your perspective matters. The fact that you are a soldier, that you have seen humanity's capacity for violence, that you carry the weight of your own actions. These things make you exactly the right person to help me understand, because you know both sides. You know what humans are capable of at their worst, and his voice softened slightly. I suspect you also know what they are capable of at their best. That is why you stayed in the rescue service for so long, is it not? Because you believed that saving lives mattered, that individual human lives, even strangers, were worth risking your own life for. That is not the perspective of someone who has given up on their species. He was right, and hearing it laid out so plainly made something loosen in my chest, some knot of guilt and doubt that I'd been carrying for years. So what happens now? I asked. Do we just let you go? Let you wander around observing humanity? Do we keep you here? Study you? Try to understand you? I don't even know what the protocol is for this situation. Azrael's lips curved into something that might have been a smile, though it held more sadness than joy. There is no protocol, Soldier Jake. This has never happened before, not in all of human history. An observer awakened after millennia of sleep, emerging into a world transformed beyond recognition. We will have to make this up as we go. But for now, I have one more question for you, perhaps the most important question. He took a step closer, and I resisted the urge to step back. After everything I have told you, after learning that your species is being watched and measured and potentially judged, after understanding that free will was given to you as both gift and test, tell me this. Do you still believe your choices matter? Do you still believe that what you do, what you choose, has meaning? Or does knowing you are observed make everything feel hollow, like acting in a play where the ending has already been written? The question hung between us, and I realized that my answer might be the first real test in this new phase of whatever relationship was forming between humanity and this ancient being. And I had no idea what the right answer was. For the next 2 days, I basically lived in that laboratory 7 floors beneath the earth, talking to an angel while the military recorded every word. They'd set up cameras, microphones, monitoring equipment that measured everything from temperature fluctuations to electromagnetic radiation, trying to capture and quantify something that existed beyond their instrument's ability to measure. Dr. Hammond was there for most of it, sitting in the observation room with a team of specialists, linguists, theologians, physicists, military strategists, even a couple of priests they'd flown in from God knows where. They all watched and listened as Azrael and I had the strangest conversations I've ever had in my life. And the weird thing was, after that first hour, I stopped being terrified. Not completely. There was always that undercurrent of primal fear when you're near something so fundamentally other, but it faded into something more like awe, like reverence. Azrael was patient with my questions, even the stupid ones, even the ones that probably seemed infantile to a being that had existed for millennia. He never showed frustration or condescension, just this deep, profound sadness that seemed to permeate everything he said, like he was mourning something that hadn't happened yet. Or maybe mourning something that had happened so long ago that even he was starting to forget the details. We talked about everything, his origins, his purpose, the nature of reality, the structure of the universe, humanity's place in it, and every answer he gave just led to more questions, like peeling back layers of an infinite onion where each layer revealed something more incomprehensible than the last. The first thing I needed to understand, the thing that kept circling back in my mind, was what exactly Azrael was. Not the metaphysical question, I was still struggling with that, but the practical one. What was his function? What had he been designed to do? I am not a guardian angel, he told me on that first full day, his voice carrying that harmonics that made my chest vibrate. I know your culture has that concept, the idea that each person has a celestial protector watching over them, intervening in small ways to keep them safe. That is not what I am. I do not protect. I do not intervene. I observe. I record. I archive. Think of me as, he paused, searching for a metaphor I could understand, a living library. Everything I witness is stored within me, not in neurons or digital memory, but in the fabric of my being. Every choice your species has made, every triumph and tragedy I've observed, it's all still here, accessible, perfect in its detail. I am a chronicle of humanity, or at least of the period I was assigned to watch. When I return, he stopped abruptly, and I saw something flicker in his eyes, uncertainty maybe, or fear. If I return, I should say, when I return to where I came from, I will share what I've recorded with the others. That is my purpose, to witness and to testify, to provide evidence of what humanity is, what it was, what it might become. The Great Division, I said, remembering the phrase he'd used during our first conversation. You said you were sent to observe during something called the Great Division. What was that? Azrael's wings shifted. That unconscious movement I'd learned meant he was accessing memories, sorting through vast amounts of archived information. In your timeline, it would have been approximately 12,000 years ago. Though your scientists do not have accurate records from that period, there was a moment when humanity stood at a crossroads, when you had developed enough consciousness, enough capacity for abstract thought and moral reasoning that you could begin making real choices about your future. Before that, you were driven mostly by instinct, by survival needs. But at that point, you began to ask the big questions. Why are we here? What happens when we die? Is there purpose to existence? And with those questions came the capacity for true good and true evil, because you could now choose your actions based on philosophical frameworks rather than just immediate needs. My kind called it the Great Division because it's when you divided from the rest of the animal kingdom, became something new, something unprecedented. And it's also when we divided among ourselves about how to handle you. The sadness deepened in his voice. Some of us believed you should be guided carefully, given rules and structure, and divine intervention to keep you on the right path. Others believed you should be left completely alone, allowed to succeed or fail without any interference. The compromise was observers. We would watch, we would record, but we would not act. We would let you exercise your free will completely, and then report back on the results. But Azrael had broken that rule, and that's where the story got really interesting and really troubling. Over the course of that first day, he told me about the celestial war, though he was careful with his words, like he was trying not to reveal too much or maybe trying not to remember it too clearly. There came a point, he said, his golden eyes distant, when the faction that favored intervention grew strong enough to act. They looked at what humanity was doing, the wars, the slavery, the environmental destruction even in those early days, and they decided the experiment had failed. They wanted to reset it, to guide humanity back to a more harmonious path, even if it meant removing your freedom to choose. The other faction opposed this absolutely. They argued that removing free will would invalidate the entire purpose, that you had to be allowed to make your mistakes and learn from them, or the exercise was meaningless. He paused, and I saw something that might have been shame in his expression. I tried to find a middle path. I thought perhaps if humanity was warned, if they understood the consequences of their choices more clearly, they might choose differently without actually having their will removed. So I tried to communicate. I tried to give knowledge that might help you see what you were doing to yourselves and to your world. This was seen as interference. This violated the compact, and for that violation, I was cast down. The way he said cast down carried weight, like it was a specific event, a specific punishment, not just a metaphor. The battle, when it came, was brief but devastating. Those of us who had tried to intervene against those who enforced non-interference. I fell into your ocean, and as I fell, I chose hibernation. I sealed myself in ice, preferring that to destruction, or to being brought back to face judgment. The question that haunted me most, that kept me awake during the few hours they forced me to leave the lab and try to sleep, was the question of God. Not whether God existed. Azrael had made it clear he didn't have a definitive answer to that. But what role God played in all of this. On the second day, I finally asked it directly. If you were created, if there are beings that made you and gave you purpose, does that mean God exists? Does that mean everything in the Bible or other religious texts is real? Azrael looked at me for a long time before answering, and I could feel him choosing his words carefully. I was created by something, Soldier Jake. Something vast and powerful beyond my comprehension. Something that existed before me and will exist after me. Is that what you call God? Perhaps. But it's not what most of your religions describe. There is no bearded man on a throne. There is no simple dichotomy of heaven and hell, saved and damned. There is something more complex, more alien to human understanding than any of your theological frameworks can capture. What I can tell you is this: you were given a gift. Not the gift of being watched over and protected. The gift of being left alone. The gift of freedom so complete, so total, that you can choose to destroy yourselves and no one will stop you. That is what God, or whatever force set this in motion, gave you. Not comfort, not safety, not guaranteed salvation, but choice. Real, terrifying, absolute choice. And that is harder, so much harder, than being told what to do and promised reward for obedience. He leaned closer, and I felt the temperature drop another few degrees. Your species has been given the hardest burden in all of creation. The burden of deciding for yourselves what you will become. And you don't even realize how rare that is, how precious, how terrifying. I couldn't help it. The frustration, the anger, the sheer unfairness of it all boiled over. That's bullshit, I said. And I saw several people in the observation room flinch at my tone. If angels exist, if you exist, if there's some vast cosmic power that created everything, why doesn't it help? Why does it let children starve? Why does it let wars happen? Why does it let people suffer for no reason? If you can intervene, if you have the power to stop suffering, how can you just stand there and watch? Azrael didn't react to my anger, didn't seem offended or defensive. If anything, he looked like he'd been expecting this question, like he'd heard it before countless times across millennia. Because helping you would rob you of the very thing that makes you human, he said quietly. Every time we intervene, every time we prevent a consequence or ease a hardship or guide a choice, we take away a piece of your agency. If we stopped every war, you would never learn to choose peace. If we prevented every famine, you would never learn to share resources. If we healed every illness, you would never develop the compassion to care for the sick. The suffering you experience is terrible. Yes, it pains me to witness it. It has pained all of us who have watched. But it is the price of freedom, and the alternative, a universe where you are protected from all consequences, guided in all choices, prevented from ever experiencing pain. That would make you pets, not people. That would make your existence meaningless. He spread his hands in a gesture that might have been helplessness. You ask why we don't help. I ask you this. Would you trade your freedom for safety? Would you give up your ability to choose in exchange for a guarantee that you would never suffer? Because that is the choice. You cannot have both. And the thing that makes me still believe in humanity, after all I've seen, is that given that choice, most of you would choose freedom. Most of you would rather suffer and choose than be comfortable and controlled. That is what makes you beautiful. That is what makes you worth watching. And that is why my presence here now is so significant, so dangerous. His eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made me catch my breath. Because I should not have been awakened. The fact that you found me, that you brought me back, that I am here speaking with you, it means something has changed. It means we are approaching another decision point, another great division. My presence here is not an accident, Soldier Jake. You awakened me because something is coming. Another end of a cycle. Another moment when humanity will have to choose what it wants to become. And this time, I don't know if you'll survive the choice. On the third day, Azrael asked me if I wanted to see what he'd seen. Not hear about it, not have it described in words that would inevitably fail to capture the reality. Actually see it, experience it. I can share my memories with you, he said, and there was warning in his voice, caution. Not all of them. That would destroy your mind, burn through your neurons like fire through paper. But I can show you fragments, images, moments that will help you understand what I've witnessed, what I've been part of. The war in the heavens, the fall, the choices that led to this moment. But I must warn you, Soldier Jake, what you see cannot be unseen. These memories will become part of you, permanently. They will change how you perceive reality, how you understand your place in the universe. Some humans who have been shown such things have gone mad. Others have become prophets, unable to function in normal society because they've seen too much truth. Still others have simply shut down, their minds unable to process the cognitive dissonance between what they thought they knew and what they now know to be real. He extended his hand, palm up, those long fingers uncurling in an invitation and a challenge. The choice is yours. You can continue as you are with only words to understand me by, forever wondering if I'm lying or deluded or if you're the one who's lost his grip on sanity. Or you can take my hand, and I will show you truth that few living humans have ever witnessed. But understand, there is no going back. Once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you know, you cannot unknow. I stared at that offered hand for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. My mind racing through implications and consequences, weighing curiosity against self-preservation. I took his hand. I don't know why, exactly. Maybe it was the soldier in me, trained to gather intelligence no matter the personal cost. Maybe it was simple human curiosity, that drive to know that has pushed our species forward, even when ignorance would have been safer. Or maybe I was already too far gone, already too changed by my exposure to Azrael to make rational decisions anymore. His skin was cold, far colder than human skin should be, cold enough that I felt it through my palm immediately, a cold that wasn't quite physical, that seemed to sink deeper than flesh and bone, touching something more fundamental. His fingers closed around my hand gently, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the world exploded. That's the only way I can describe it. My vision went white, then black, then filled with colors that don't exist in normal human perception. Colors that I still don't have names for. Colors that my eyes shouldn't have been able to see but somehow did. I felt myself falling, or flying, or both simultaneously, disoriented and unmoored from my body. And then the vision started, flooding my consciousness like a dam breaking. And I understood what Azrael had meant about some minds not being able to handle it. Because what I saw was so far beyond normal human experience, so utterly alien and vast and terrifying and beautiful, that my brain kept trying to shut down, kept trying to reject it, kept screaming that this wasn't possible, wasn't real, couldn't be processed through the limited circuitry of a human mind. I saw the war, not a human war with tanks and bullets and bombs, but something infinitely more terrible. The sky, or what passed for sky in whatever realm this was on fire. Not normal fire, but something that burned in every color simultaneously. Something that hurt to look at, but that I couldn't look away from. Beings like Azrael, hundreds of them, thousands, filling the air like a storm of wings and light and fury. They were fighting each other, and the combat was nothing like human warfare. They moved too fast, struck with weapons that weren't physical but that tore reality itself, creating wounds in space that bled light and darkness simultaneously. The sound was overwhelming, a chorus of voices raised in rage and sorrow and determination, singing in that harmonic language I'd heard on the helicopter radio, except now it was amplified a millionfold, turning the air itself into a weapon. I saw beings fall, saw their wings torn, saw them plummet like stars falling from heaven, trailing fire and screaming in voices that made my soul ache. And I understood, in a way that bypassed logic and went straight to instinctual knowing, that this was real, that this had actually happened, that this wasn't metaphor or myth, but recorded history from a perspective no human should have access to. The war in heaven wasn't a story, it was a fact, and it had been fought over us, over humanity, over the question of whether we deserved to continue our experiment in free will, or whether we needed to be corrected, guided, controlled for our own good. The vision shifted, and I saw cities. Not human cities, but structures that made human architecture look like children's blocks. Geometric perfection that hurt to comprehend. Buildings, if you could call them that, made of crystallized light or solidified mathematics or concepts given physical form. These were the habitations of angels, or whatever species Azrael belonged to. Places that existed in dimensions my three-dimensional mind wasn't equipped to fully grasp. And I saw those cities under siege. Saw them being destroyed by the very beings who had built them, brother against brother, family against family, all because they couldn't agree on what to do about us, about humanity, about whether we were worth preserving or whether we were a failed experiment that needed to be terminated before we caused more damage. I saw one angel. I don't know if it was Azrael. They all looked similar in this form, magnificent and terrible, standing before a council of others, pleading for something. I couldn't hear the words, but I felt the emotion. Desperation, conviction, fear, and I saw the judgment, saw the others shake their heads, saw their decision written in movements too subtle for human perception, but crystal clear in this vision. No, intervention is forbidden. And I saw the angel's response, defiance. I saw it turn and dive, plummeting toward Earth, toward humanity, determined to warn us even if it meant destruction. I saw other angels pursue, saw the battle in the sky, saw the moment when the defiant one was struck, when its wings were broken, when it fell into the ocean and the water froze around it instantly, trapping it in ice that would preserve it for millennia. I saw more, fragments and flashes, humans in ancient times, looking up at the sky and seeing things they couldn't explain, creating myths and religions to make sense of what they'd witnessed. Angels walking among humans, disguised, observing, recording, never interfering even when they desperately wanted to, even when watching human suffering tore at them. I saw the moment when humanity gained true consciousness, that great division Azrael had spoken of, saw our ancestors suddenly realizing they were aware, that they could choose, that they had power over their own destiny. And I saw the terror in the angels who witnessed it, the understanding that we'd been given something precious and dangerous, something that could lead to transcendence or to extinction, and nobody knew which way it would go. I saw timelines, possibilities, futures that might have been or might still be, branching out like tree limbs, some ending in light and others in darkness and most in something between. And I understood with horrifying clarity that there was no predetermined outcome, no guaranteed salvation, no divine intervention waiting to save us at the last moment. We were truly free, truly alone in our choices, and that freedom was the greatest gift and the greatest burden any species had ever been given. The weight of that understanding, the sheer scope of it, was crushing. I felt my mind starting to fracture under the strain, felt consciousness beginning to slip away, and then suddenly I was back, gasping in the lab, my hand still gripped in Azrael's cold fingers. I collapsed. Would have hit the floor if Azrael hadn't caught me, lowering me gently until I was sitting with my back against the wall, my vision swimming, my head pounding like someone had split it open with an axe. I could hear alarms going off, could hear Dr. Hammond's voice shouting through the intercom, demanding to know what had happened. But my attention was pulled to the observation window, where Sarah was pressed against the glass, her eyes wide, her mouth open in a silent scream. Blood was running from her nose, both nostrils, streaming down her face. And then she started convulsing, her whole body seizing, and she collapsed out of my line of sight. "Sarah!" I tried to stand, tried to move, but my legs weren't working. Azrael turned toward the observation window, and I saw something flicker across his face. Concern, maybe guilt. He moved with that impossible speed, crossing the lab in a single stride, and I heard the door to the observation room slam open. Through the glass, I could see him kneeling beside Sarah, who was still seizing on the floor, her body jerking violently, foam at the corners of her mouth. Dr. Hammond and others were there, trying to help, but Azrael waved them back with one gesture that somehow conveyed absolute authority. He placed his hand on Sarah's forehead, and light flowed from his palm, that same blue-white luminescence that had filled the ice. Sarah's convulsions stopped immediately. Her body went limp, and I couldn't tell if she was breathing, couldn't tell if he'd saved her or killed her. "What did you do?" I managed to rasp out, though I don't know if he could hear me through the glass. But somehow, he did. His voice resonated in my mind, gentle but sad. "I removed what she couldn't carry. She was exposed to my presence too directly for too long. The resonance between us was creating interference patterns in her neural structure. She was being shown things, memories that leaked from me to her, and her mind couldn't process them. So I took them away, removed the memories of what she'd seen, smoothed over the damage. She will live, she will recover, but she will not remember these days, not clearly. For her, it will be like a fever dream, vague and disconnected. It's a kindness, Soldier Jake. Some truths are too heavy for mortal minds to bear." He stood, turning back toward me, and I saw Sarah being carried out on a stretcher by medical personnel, her face pale but peaceful, like she was sleeping. "You asked to see," Azrael said, and there was no accusation in his voice, just statement of fact. "And I showed you. Now you understand. Now you know what I know, that your species stands at the edge of another transformation, another choice point, and I was awakened to witness it, to record it. And perhaps, if I'm brave enough or foolish enough to break the rules again, to warn you one more time before it's too late. They came for Azrael on the 4th day, and I knew the moment I saw the men in black tactical gear that this wasn't going to end well. Not regular military. These guys had that special operations edge, the kind of soldiers who don't exist on any official roster, who carry weapons that aren't standard issue, who answer to people whose names you'll never know. Dr. Hammond tried to soften the blow, tried to make it sound reasonable when she pulled me aside in the corridor outside the observation room. "Sergeant Mercer, there's been a decision made at the highest levels. The entity, Azrael, is being transferred to a more secure facility where we have better resources to understand what we're dealing with. You've done excellent work establishing communication, and we're grateful for that. But this situation is beyond what we can handle here. The transportation is being arranged for tomorrow morning at 0500 hours? She wouldn't meet my eyes when she said it, which told me everything I needed to know. "Where are you taking him?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. That's classified, I'm afraid. But I can assure you he'll be treated humanely. This is about understanding, not exploitation. That's when I knew she was lying, or at least lying to herself. Because there was no way the government, any government, was going to treat an actual angel as anything other than a weapon to be studied, dissected if necessary, and weaponized if possible. I'd seen enough in my military career to know how this worked. Something unprecedented gets discovered, something that could give strategic advantage, and suddenly all the rules about ethics and humanity go out the window. They were going to take him to Area 51, or some black site I'd never heard of. They were going to cut him apart piece by piece, and they were going to study him until there was nothing left to study. I went back into the lab, where Azrael was still standing in the same position he'd been in for hours, perfectly still, perfectly patient. The tactical team was setting up equipment around him, preparing for the transfer, reinforced containment pods, some kind of energy-dampening field generators, enough firepower to take down a small army. He watched them work with those golden eyes, showing no emotion, no resistance, no fear. Just observation, like he was recording this moment the same way he'd recorded thousands of years of human history. "Azrael," I said quietly, positioning myself so my back was to the observation window, to the cameras. "They're going to move you tomorrow, to another facility. Do you understand what that means?" His eyes shifted to me, and I saw something in them that might have been amusement, or might have been sadness. "I understand perfectly, Soldier Jake. They fear what they cannot control, so they will attempt to control it through force and containment. This is a pattern I have observed many times throughout human history. It rarely ends well." "Then why are you letting them?" I asked, frustration bleeding into my voice. "You could escape. You have wings. You have power. I can't even begin to understand. You could leave this place any time you wanted. So why are you just standing here waiting to be taken?" Azrael tilted his head in that way I'd come to recognize as him considering how to explain complex concepts to my limited human understanding. "Because I am also observing you, Jake Mercer. I am watching to see what choice you will make. Whether you will allow this to happen, or whether you will act to prevent it. This is not my choice to make. It is yours." The weight of what he was saying hit me like a physical blow. He was putting the decision on me, not because he couldn't escape, he absolutely could, but because he wanted to see what I would choose. Whether I would let fear and obedience to authority dictate my actions, or whether I would do what I knew in my gut was right, even if it meant throwing away everything I'd built, everything I'd worked for. It was a test, just like everything else about this situation had been a test. "That's not fair," I said, and I heard my voice crack slightly. "You can't put that on me. I'm just a sergeant. I don't have the authority or the resources or the—" "You have free will," Azrael interrupted gently. "That is the only authority you need. You have the ability to choose, and that choice matters. It always matters, no matter how powerless you feel, no matter how big the forces arrayed against you. This is what I've been trying to help you understand, Jake. Your choices have weight. Your actions have consequences. And sometimes the right choice is the one that costs you everything." He looked at the tactical team setting up their equipment, then back at me. "I cannot tell you what to do. That would invalidate the entire purpose. But I can tell you this. Whatever you choose, I will not hold it against you. If you allow them to take me, to study me, to use me, I will understand. You have a life, a career, people who depend on you. Throwing that away for a being you've known for less than a week would be irrational by any human standard. But if you choose to help me, I will remember, and I will be grateful. The choice is yours, Soldier Jake. It always has been. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't sleep. I lay in my temporary quarters, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through scenarios and possibilities and consequences. If I helped Azrael escape, I would be court-martialed at minimum, probably imprisoned, possibly disappeared to some black site myself because I'd know too much. My military career would be over. Any hope of a normal life afterward would be destroyed. I'd be branded a traitor, a deserter, maybe even insane. But if I did nothing, if I let them take him, I would have to live with the knowledge that I'd stood by while something ancient and wise and fundamentally good was locked away and dissected like a lab specimen. I'd seen enough in those visions, felt enough in Azrael's presence, to know that he wasn't a threat. He wasn't evil or malevolent or even indifferent. He was sad. He was lonely. He was trying to understand what had become of the species he'd been created to observe. and he'd been willing to share truth with me even knowing I might not survive the experience. Around 300 hours, I made my decision. I sat up, pulled on my clothes, and started planning. The security system in this facility was sophisticated, but not impenetrable. I'd had 8 years of training in infiltration and extraction. I knew where the blind spots were, where the cameras didn't quite cover, where the guards did their rounds. I had clearance to move through most of the facility, at least until the transfer tomorrow, when they'd probably revoke it. I had maybe 2 hours to pull this off before the early shift arrived and the window closed forever. I made my way down to B7, moving through corridors I'd memorized over the past few days, timing my movements to avoid the guard patrols. The hardest part was the security station outside the lab. 3 guards, armed, alert. But they knew me, had seen me going in and out of the lab for days now. I walked up to them with confidence I didn't feel, holding a coffee I'd grabbed from the break room. "Hey guys, can't sleep. Mind if I sit with our guest for a bit? Last chance before they ship him out." The senior guard, a staff sergeant named Rodriguez, frowned. "You know we're not supposed to allow access without Dr. Hammond's authorization anymore, Mercer. Come on, man. You really think he's going to hurt me after 4 days of peaceful conversation? I just want to say goodbye." I let some genuine emotion show, which wasn't hard because it was real. Rodriguez looked at the other guards, then sighed. "Fine. 30 minutes. But we're watching." He keyed in the access code and the door unlocked. I stepped into the lab, and Azrael's eyes found me immediately. He knew. Somehow he knew what I'd decided, and I saw something that might have been approval in his expression. I moved close, speaking quietly, even though I knew the cameras were recording everything. "We're leaving. Now. Can you do something about the electronics? The cameras? The alarms?" Azrael nodded slowly. "I can create electromagnetic interference. It will disable the security systems for approximately 3 minutes. After that, they will restore backup power, and lockdown protocols will engage." "Can you reach an exit in 3 minutes?" "I can if you can fly," I said. And for the first time since I'd met him, Azrael smiled. It was a sad smile, but genuine. "I can fly, Soldier Jake. The question is, can you hold on?" What happened next was chaos. Azrael raised his hand and light flared from his palm, not bright but pulsing with energy that I felt in my fillings. Every screen in the lab went dark simultaneously. The door locks disengaged with audible clicks. Alarms that should have been screaming stayed silent. Azrael moved to the exterior wall, 7 floors of concrete and steel between us and the surface, and touched it with one finger. The wall didn't explode or shatter, it just ceased to be. Reality bent around his touch, and suddenly there was an opening, a tunnel leading up and out, the walls smooth as glass. "This will not last," Azrael said, his wings unfurling to their full span, 12 feet of impossible feathers that caught the emergency lighting and turned it into rainbows. "Hold on to me. Do not let go no matter what happens." I grabbed onto his shoulders. His skin was so cold it burned. And then we were moving, shooting up through that tunnel faster than physics should allow, the walls blurring past us. We burst out into the Alaskan night, into air so cold it froze the breath in my lungs, and Azrael's wings caught the wind. Behind us, I could hear alarms finally blaring, voices shouting, but we were already rising, already moving away from the base at a speed that made my eyes water. Azrael flew like he'd been born to it, which I suppose he had been, his wings beating in a rhythm that seemed to bend the air itself. We flew north, toward the Arctic Ocean, toward ice and emptiness, and the only place I could think of where they might not immediately find us. I'd managed to send a text message to Tommy before the security systems went down, just 3 words, "Need a ride." And Tommy, crazy loyal bastard that he was, had responded with coordinates and a time. All I had to do was get us there alive. Azrael flew for 30 minutes, covering distances that should have taken hours, and then we dropped down onto a frozen expanse of nothing, miles from any human habitation. The silence was absolute. The stars above were so bright they looked like holes punched in the fabric of reality, and in the distance, I could hear the sound of helicopter rotors. Tommy had come through. We were going to make it, at least for now. Tommy landed the helicopter on the ice about 100 yards from where Azrael and I stood, the rotor wash blowing snow in blinding sheets around us. He kept the engines running, smart man, always ready for a quick exit, and I could see his face through the cockpit window, eyes wide, staring at Azrael's wings catching the moonlight. This was the first time Tommy had seen him outside the ice, seen him as he truly was, and I watched my friend's worldview shatter in real time. Azrael turned to me, and in the starlight, his skin seemed to glow with that soft blue-white luminescence I'd come to associate with him. Thank you, Soldier Jake, for choosing what you knew was right even when it cost you everything, for proving that humanity still has members who value truth over comfort, freedom over safety. You have given me something I had not felt in millennia. Hope, not certainty. I am not certain that your species will survive the trials ahead, but hope that you might. And that is more than I expected to find when you pulled me from the ice. He looked toward the helicopter, toward Tommy waiting with the engines running, ready to take us wherever we needed to go to escape the military response that was certainly already being mobilized. And then he looked north, toward the Arctic Ocean that stretched out beyond the ice shelf, toward the deep, cold waters where he'd spent thousands of years in hibernation. But now I must return. My time here has been brief, too brief to gather the observations I was meant to gather, but long enough to understand one critical thing. The world is not ready for me. Perhaps it never will be. Your species is at a crossroads, yes, but you must navigate it on your own. My presence, my intervention, even my observations, would taint the process, would invalidate the very free will you've been given. I cannot be here, Jake. Not now. Maybe not ever again. I felt something crack inside my chest. Some hope I hadn't known I was holding on to. What? No, you can't go back. We just escaped. They'll be looking for us, but we can disappear. I know people, places we could hide. You can observe from there, you can… Jake, his voice, gentle but firm, cut through my panic. You are thinking of me as a refugee who needs protection, but I am not human. I do not need to hide or flee or start a new life in some remote location. I need to return to my purpose, and I cannot do that while being hunted by your government. More importantly, I should not do that. The more I interact with humanity, the more I risk influencing the outcome of the very experiment I was designed to observe. Already I have changed you. I have changed Dr. Chen, though she will not remember. I have changed the trajectory of events simply by waking up. If I stay, if I continue to be present in your world, I will distort everything around me. People will worship me, or fear me, or try to use me, and in any of those scenarios, they will not be acting from pure free will anymore. They will be reacting to me, to my existence, rather than making choices based on their own nature. Do you understand? I did understand, intellectually, but emotionally I wanted to scream at the unfairness of it. I'd thrown away my entire life to save him, and now he was telling me he was going back to the ice, back to sleep, back to the cold, dark silence. Then why did I rescue you? What was the point of any of this if you're just going to go back? Azrael's expression softened, and he reached out to place a hand on my shoulder. The cold of his touch sank through my jacket, through my skin, straight to my bones. The point, Jake Mercer, was the choice. You chose compassion over obedience. You chose to save a being you barely understood because you knew it was right. That choice mattered. It will always matter. And the fact that I am returning to the ice does not erase the significance of what you did. You proved something to me, and more importantly, you proved something to yourself. We walked together toward the edge of the ice shelf, where frozen ocean met open water, dark and uninviting under the stars. Tommy had shut down the helicopter engines and was approaching cautiously, probably trying to figure out if this was really happening or if he'd finally lost his mind. Azrael stopped at the very edge, his feet inches from the water, and those massive wings stretched out to their full span. In that moment, backlit by starlight and aurora borealis that had started dancing across the northern sky, he looked exactly like every classical painting of angels I'd ever seen, except more real, more present, more impossibly beautiful than any artist had ever managed to capture. "I want to give you something," he said, and he reached back to his left wing, his fingers finding a specific feather near the joint. He pulled, and I heard a sound like breaking glass, crystalline and pure. The feather came free in his hand, and it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It looked solid, substantial, but also somehow translucent, like it was made of frozen light or crystallized air. It was about a foot long, perfectly symmetrical, and it pulsed with that soft blue-white glow. He held it out to me. "Keep this, not as proof, though it will serve as that if you choose to show it, but as a reminder that you met something beyond your understanding and chose kindness, a reminder that free will is both gift and burden, and a reminder that you are not alone in the universe, even when you feel most isolated. I took the feather, and the moment my fingers closed around it, I felt a surge of sensation. Like every moment of our time together was compressed into a single instant and downloaded into my memory with perfect clarity. I would never forget. I couldn't forget, even if I wanted to. But I need to warn you, Azrael continued, his voice taking on a tone of deep seriousness. If you show this to others, if you try to prove what happened here, you will never know peace again. They will hunt you for it. Scientists will want to study it. Governments will want to confiscate it. Religious fanatics will want to worship it or destroy it. And you will spend the rest of your life running, hiding, trying to protect something that people will kill for. So my advice is this: keep it hidden, keep it secret. Let this be your private knowledge, your personal truth. Share it only if you believe the time is right, if you believe humanity has reached a point where they can handle this revelation without tearing themselves, and you, apart in response. I held the feather carefully, feeling its weight, its reality, its impossible existence. Should I have faith? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. After everything you've told me, everything you've shown me, should I believe in God? Should I pray? Should I trust that there's meaning to all of this? Azrael looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something like regret in those golden eyes. I don't know, Jake. I was created to observe, not to have faith. Faith is a uniquely human capacity, maybe the most important one you have. The ability to believe in something without proof, to trust in purpose even when the universe seems random and cruel. I cannot tell you whether to have faith. That is a choice only you can make. But I can tell you this: you still have choice. You always have choice. And that choice matters. Whether or not there is a God watching, whether or not there is ultimate meaning, your actions have consequences. Your kindness creates ripples. Your cruelty creates scars. And the sum total of all those choices, made by billions of humans across thousands of years, will determine what your species becomes. Is that God's plan? Is it random chance? Is it something in between? I don't know, but I know it matters. It always matters. Tommy had reached us by then, standing a respectful distance away, his face a mixture of awe and terror. Azrael acknowledged him with a nod. Thank you, pilot, for your assistance. Your loyalty to your friend is admirable. It speaks well of human capacity for connection. Then he turned back to me. I must go now. Already I can feel the search beginning. They will find this location eventually, and when they do, it's better if I'm gone. Better for you, better for them, better for the integrity of the observation. He stepped forward, his feet touching the dark water, and he didn't sink so much as lower himself into it deliberately. The cold of the Arctic Ocean should have killed a human instantly, but Azrael showed no discomfort, just that same serene expression he'd worn since waking. The water came up to his knees, then his waist, then his chest. His wings folded against his back, those impossible feathers lying flat. And as he sank deeper, I saw ice beginning to form around him, crystallizing out of the water itself, encasing him in layers of frozen protection. His eyes met mine one last time, and his voice resonated in my mind, not speaking words but conveying meaning directly. We are waiting, Jake Mercer. Waiting to see if humanity will prove itself worthy of the gift it has been given. Waiting to see if you will use your freedom to build or to destroy. Waiting to see if, when the next great division comes, you will choose transcendence or extinction. I do not know which it will be, but I will be watching. We are always watching. And we hope, against all evidence, against all probability, that you will surprise us, that you will choose better, that you will become more than you are. The choice, as always, is yours. And then he was gone, sinking beneath the surface, the ice closing over his head like a door ceiling, and the glow of his presence faded until there was nothing but dark water and frozen surface. Silence. Absolute silence. Tommy and I stood there for what might have been minutes or hours. I lost track of time, just staring at the spot where an angel had returned to the deep. The rest of the story, you probably know or can guess. Tommy flew me to a cabin he knew about, remote, off the grid, somewhere in the Canadian territories where nobody would think to look. We stayed there for 3 days while the military tore apart Alaska searching for us. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the search stopped. I got a call on Tommy's satellite phone. I don't know how they got the number. From a voice I didn't recognize telling me to return to Elmendorf Richardson. that charges would not be filed, that I would be processed out of the military with an honorable discharge and a full pension, and that in return, I would never speak about what happened, ever, to anyone. Violation of this agreement would result in immediate arrest and imprisonment at a black site where I would disappear permanently. I took the deal. What choice did I have? I went back, signed papers I wasn't allowed to read, sat through debriefings where I gave the minimum information necessary, and then I was civilian. Just like that. 8 years of service, erased. Sarah Chen died 2 weeks later. The official story was a brain aneurysm, sudden and tragic, no warning signs. But I knew better. I knew what Azrael had done to her, removing memories that would have destroyed her mind, and I suspected that the damage had been done anyway, just delayed. Tommy disappeared 3 months after that. No body, no note, just gone. His apartment was cleaned out, his phone disconnected, his bank accounts closed. Either he ran, or someone decided he knew too much. I haven't heard from him since, and I don't expect to. As for me, I'm alive, if you can call this living. I have the feather. I keep it wrapped in cloth, hidden in a place I won't disclose. And I take it out sometimes when I need to remind myself that I'm not insane, that it really happened. And every time I touch it, I feel that connection, that link to something vast and old and infinitely sad. I don't know if God exists. I don't know if Azrael's people are angels or aliens or something that doesn't fit into either category. I don't know if humanity is going to make it, if we're going to pass whatever test we're being subjected to, if we'll survive the next great division that Azrael warned about. But I know this: something exists beyond us. Something watches us. Something records our choices and waits to see what we'll become. And based on what I see every day, the wars, the hatred, the willful ignorance, the cruelty we inflict on each other and on our world, I think we're failing. I think we're failing the test, and I don't know if we even realize we're being tested. That's why I'm telling you this story, because someone needs to know. Someone needs to hear the truth before it's too late, before we make the final choice that determines whether our species continues or ends. I don't expect you to believe me. I don't even expect you to care. But if this recording survives, if someone hears it and remembers, maybe it'll matter. Maybe it'll make a difference. Maybe one person will choose differently because they know they're being watched, because they understand that free will is a gift that comes with responsibility. Or maybe it won't matter at all. Maybe we're already past the point of no return. I don't know. But I had to try. I had to speak, because that's the choice I'm making. And choice, as Azrael taught me, is all we really have. It's all we've ever had. Make yours count.